This episode is brought to you by Ghost Patch. Ghost Patch is a law enforcement owned and operated company specializing in patches, coins, and flex shields. Quality is top priority with low prices. They always offer free design work and never charge mold or setup fees. Stop letting the big companies rip you off and check out Ghost Patch at ghostpatch.com and ghostpatchcustom.com. Now to the next story.
I'll remember, and I won't say names or nothing, but I remember when Mark Nix was killed, and I remember people saying on the radio, don't run up on the car, don't run up on the car. And I'm going to give Mark the benefit of the doubt because he may not have run up on the car had it stayed in a traffic kind of stop. But the car wrecked out and was faced bumper to bumper with him. And so he made the decision to go forward. And Jason Jark, oh my God, what an outstanding human being he is. But he ran up there and all that fire going on, guys were laying out expression. But Mark Nix ran up the car and was shot by the only shot that gun was allowed to shoot because it jammed. And he got shot and it hit his badge and it hit his carotid artery and he passed because of that. And one of the things I remember telling people, I got to have that video and this is what we're going to do with it. We're going to take it to the police headquarters building. We're going to say every sector has to send one person around the clock to come see that video. Because when you see that video, you may not run up on a car again. 6 months later, a man who had killed and raped his two stepsons, his wife, he gets in a chase. A young officer by the name of Wood was behind him, and he shoots at Chris. So now we have this thing going on. And I use that. And this is just 6 months after Nix has been killed running up on a car. And the chase is going on. And I remember V. Lee. V. Lee is on because SWAT is in the chase. And he's saying, don't run up on the car, don't run up on the car, don't run up on the car. And what happens is he goes into a cul-de-sac. And they said he's going into the cul-de-sac. So this is going to end right here. Everybody knew it. Don't run up the car was the last thing Vince Lee said over the radio. And then, of course, the car stopped. And then all of a sudden, all these officers, and I'm telling you, great police officers were running up on that car. Some were fighting on this side. Somebody put a rifle through on the other side, and it was just havoc, right? That happens. I think if we'd shown that video, it wouldn't have happened that way. I think somebody would have adhered to don't run up on the car. So I ended up going, as part of my thing, going into prisons for this other thing. I went and interviewed Robert Sparks. And I asked him several questions, but the one I think is important to us is that, so tell me a little bit about how that ended. He goes, let me tell you something. I wished I had not run out of bullets and thrown that gun out the car because I had no idea they were going to give me an opportunity to kill as many of them as I could. And he said, I would have had I had a gun. He says, because I never thought they were going to rush up on me. I thought they were going to do the deal, pro me out, do that stuff. And he told me that from death row. It was pretty powerful. And so I said, and I fought a little longer, and we got the video, and we started showing it. And from what I was told by FTOs and supervisors and patrols said, we're seeing a lot more felony traffic stops now. And again, to me, that's what my job is. And I know it's Monday morning quarterbacking, but as I always started that class out with, is if something ever happens to me, and somebody here can teach so that nobody else does what I did that got myself killed or injured, please do it. Absolutely do it. And I think most officers would agree with that. They were coming to Dallas and they were taking over the drug business. And I'm not kidding. These kids have been in war in their country when they were little. So at 14, it didn't bother me one bit to shoot your kneecaps off because you were short one day, or shoot 4 people in a bathtub, or shoot somebody and put them in especially if it was somebody local, shoot them, put them in the trunk of the car and set the car on fire. That was how vicious it was. Still believe in our specialized units. That's where you get the cream of the crop most of the time. I believe that cop work, sometimes it gets harder because they take rules and change them a little bit, but the cops that are out there today are just as good and they're getting it done. It may not be the same case in all units, but any specialized unit, detectives and these units and SWAT. I mean, we got the best SWAT team in the world. I really still believe that.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us.
Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal,
And we can learn from those mistakes.
and together we can bridge the divide.
The roots of professionalism as a model for American policing are explored by focusing upon the career of August Vollmer, Police Chief of Berkeley, California, 1905 to 1932. August Vollmer is widely considered the founder of professional policing. Vollmer instituted police training, advocated using college-educated officers, and promoted the use of new technology for fighting crime, such as fingerprinting, polygraph machines, and crime labs. In addition, Vollmer equipped the Berkeley PD with radio communication and in 1914 established the first automobile patrol in the United States. The model of professional policing was developed from Vollmer's 6 essential elements. The police force should stay out of politics. Members should be well-trained, disciplined, and tightly organized. Laws should be equally enforced. The police should use technological developments. Every police department uses aspects of these essential elements, laid forth by Vollmer, throughout the history of policing in the United States. While Robert Peel is known as the father of modern policing, it is Vollmer who is known for putting an emphasis on training and education. The Dallas Police Department is the 9th largest PD in the United States, having one of the longest academies and also having some of the most innovative training in the business. Today's guest is known in DPD lore as an innovator in training and set the table for Dallas PD for years to come in bringing revolutionary training to not just detectives, but for the backbone of Dallas Police Department, the patrol officers. This episode will document a life and career of a servant that began in 1981 and continues to this day of protecting and being an innovator. The great John Palmer made a statement in episode 99 as he called for the story of one of the people that changed the landscape of training in the Dallas Police Department. We listened, and now we have answered. Please welcome on former Dallas PD, Kevin Navarro. Kevin, if you'd have told me almost 20 years ago when you had me helping with RBT and surveillance school and all the many trainings that you put on that we would be interviewing you for a show, I would have lost a lot of money on a bet.
And I would have taken that bet.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
It's about time. We've been trying to get you on here for, 3 years? Yeah.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. After I've seen what y'all have done with the show, it's incredible what y'all are doing. And what I love about it, it's all about what can we bring to the law enforcement officer now that they didn't have in generations before. And that's the wellness part of it.
Yeah, it's long overdue. And being part of this unit, I see firsthand the need for it and also the overdue need for this department specifically in the realm of wellness. So,
well, as I always said, Dallas is usually on the leading cusp of things in training wise and stuff. The SWAT team is the best in the country. And then listening to Joe Dennemy's episode talking about how our honor guard was not there. And, I've seen our honor guard. It's the best in the country.
They are good.
But you don't realize there was a time before that. And it was just the messages you're bringing because of that is amazing. So I'm glad to be here.
thank you. It's our honor. I want to welcome on Danny Canetti's back. By then, everybody's heard episode 100. Sergeant Kent Wolverton's back. And I talked about in the intro Palmer demanding you come on, and we're going to deliver for one-on-one.
I do whatever Palmer tells me to do. He's a great man.
Great guy. We've been very happy to be in such a position to document Dallas PD history, law enforcement history, and just the true trailblazers that basically made things happen. And I remember, you changed my outlook of training and my approach to training and helped me understand the importance of training as opposed to just looking at it as an 8-hour class and checking off a box and getting out of there, and getting on with my day. That's why I wanted to get you on here to kind of document and preserve what you did for the department. And I'm glad that Palmer nudged us in his episode to basically, you got to have this guy on. He did change the landscape of training in Dallas PD.
Yeah, I did it with a lot of help. But the idea of it was that as I talk in classes, I said my job, when an instructor's job is to 25% of the time we're trying to give that officer who doesn't want to be there in the first place a little bit of something that he can take, whether it makes him think, it makes him laugh, it makes him or her. It's very important that we do that. And the other 75% of the time, I'm just trying to entertain them and me, to be honest with you, because I'm teaching the same thing over and over and over again. And that's why I guess sometimes along the ways I mess with a recruit or two in the classroom. So because it just makes it fun.
Well, I think bringing levity to anything.
Yes.
We try to do that. You listen to the show, you know that we're not opposed to throwing shenanigans in, but you did make it entertaining. Some very dry subjects really entertaining.
Yeah, and I actually feel bad for the recruits these days who don't get to experience Kevin Navarro. It was just such an injection of some energy to be partway through the academy, going through the drought stuff. And then all of a sudden Kevin comes in and he's giving you shit, giving you a hard time, keeping you on your toes, cracking jokes. But all the material's presented in such a lively way and engaging. And then at the end of kind of whatever block of training you go through with him, you come out on the other side feeling like the guy cares about you.
And truly that's what it's about. Yeah. You don't get that feeling that first day I walk in there. But
no, you're like, here's another person who's here to mess with us.
Yeah. But the goal is that by the end of PVOC week, which is my first real week with you, I want you to know that guy actually cares about me.
Yeah.
And these other guys have been screaming and hollering and yelling at me, telling me I'm worthless. I actually have some value because I'm a firm believer that the day you put on a uniform, whether you have a badge on it or not, you don't treat that recruit the same way because I want him to understand that that uniform means something.
Let's get into it. Let's tell the listener the Kevin Navarro story. You were born in Oak Cliff at Methodist Hospital.
Absolutely, on the same beat that I worked many years later.
How was home life?
Oh, it's great. My mom and dad, I'm a combination of the two of them. My mom's a saint, and she just was that person that just kind of kept everything going. She wasn't real funny or anything like that, but she's just one that made everything happen, right? My dad is who y'all see a lot. He's a salesman. He was an electrical contractor. He went electrical sales business, and the whole side of the Navarro family are all in sales. So really, I just took that through my career. So my childhood was great. The one thing I will say is every time a church door was open, we were there. That's how we grew up. I mean, I thought my dad actually had the keys that unlocked it and then locked it when it was time to go. We liked it on Lord's Supper Day because we got to drink all the extra grape juice.
Grape juice. Yeah.
It was great. But that's my life was built in a strong Christian home with good, strong Christian people.
You had in sixth grade, you had a dream of what you wanted to be when you grew up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I mean, It's funny. I talk to my kids about what they want to do, but my wife one time told me, says, I'm this many years old and I still don't know what I want to do. And so I know the rarity of being in the 6th grade and knowing I want to be a Dallas police homicide detective. But I got to be a Dallas police officer first, and I wanted that. And the reason that happened is that my dad wanted to be a Dallas police officer. And he couldn't get on because back in those days, you had to be at least 5'8" or 5'9" to get on. And my dad is 5'6". So he was too short. But he had several friends, too, who were Dallas cops. And so my dad, every Friday or Saturday night, would ride out with DPD. And he always rode with a sergeant because he only wanted to go to good stuff, right? And he would ride patrol. And Sunday mornings, we would come together for breakfast before church, and he would tell us about, I went to a call last night, and a lady was stabbed right in the chest, and the blood was everywhere. And it was like, that was my Sunday morning breakfast before we went to church. And it just got in my brain that is the coolest thing. I want to be that guy doing that. And so that's how easily that came to me. And I knew that by the time I was in 6th grade.
And you knew you wanted to be an actual homicide detective.
Absolutely.
As you grew into going through school and getting into college, that always remained your goal?
Yeah, I mean, if I could have done it without going to college, I would have, but I couldn't. So I went to college for 2 years. I got 48 hours of college. Luckily, they dropped the 3 of them because that wasn't passing, so we can get on, right? But the idea of it is that's all I wanted, is to get that 45 hours and come here.
And then your parents knew that you that was your goal, and your dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did he feel about that?
They loved it. My dad wanted to do it. He couldn't do it. He was so happy that I got to do it. And across the street when I was growing up in Duncanville, that's a little small town that I grew up in. Bill Gentry, some of the retired guys that might be listening will remember. Bill Gentry was the one that was very good about when we did the lawsuit, the pay disparity lawsuit. He's the one that wrote the email to the city manager that actually got that thing going. But he was the chief here for a long time, and he was really, really good. And I still don't know how he did it to this day, but he never moved to Dallas. And back then you had to be at Dallas. He lived across the street from me in Duncanville, but he was the chief, and he always helped me too. With that, this is what you want to do. This is how you got to do it.
So when you went through the hiring process, how did that look?
It was fun. I'll tell you a little story that when I came on, I made a mistake because the Gentrys owned a little store down in Duncanville, and I went up there one day and they was asking me, how's your background? How's that like going? Oh, it's going good. I said, I'm not worried about it because they really need Mexicans on the police department, so they're going to take me. So when I came to do that, remember that day when y'all had you come in and you got the 4 supervisors there and they're asking you all those
the interview
board.
Interview board, yes.
Scenarios. Yeah.
Yes. So I came in and I did mine, and I thought I did really well. I knew to remember those little things that they give you. And I walk out and I come back in, and it was Captain Sword who was leading mine. Long since gone, but still around because we've talked about this. But the idea of it is, he says, "I'm sorry, you did fairly well, but we're not going to be able to have you as a Dallas police officer." And I was devastated because this is all I wanted to ever do since 6th grade. He says, "We have a problem. Anybody who thinks they can come here because they're a Mexican and you don't even speak Spanish, we can't use you." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And then Chief Gentry comes into the room and they're all laughing and stuff, and I was like, "Holy moly!" That's how my police career started.
Serves you right for all the stuff you pull on everyone else all those years.
So you finally get the call. You start the academy. What academy class?
168. So when that day after Captain Sword said go down, and I joined that day. It was
go learn Spanish and come back. Yeah.
No, but I went down and joined, and I was a pre-hire, and then the academy started August, I think, the 3rd.
Okay. Who are some of the classmates that you remember and still in contact with?
A lot of them I'm still in contact. We have a very good class. Gary Grable was kind of the president of our class. Ken Bajenska was not only in my class and was the vice president. He came back later and was the president of another class, and I got to mess with him pretty good. And then Jack Googe was in that class, and you'll hear
you and Jack Gooch were classmates?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That make me old.
No, I all this time of working with you guys together, I didn't know you were classmates.
Oh yeah, Jack Googe is an incredible police officer, sergeant, and he came and helped me in the RBT. We'll talk about later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but Jack Googe, Tim Prokoff, and Dan Towns. I play golf with them still to this day. Wonderful guys.
Dan Towns he listens.
Oh yeah, I like Dan Towns' little guitar riffs he does. It reminds me of Canetti.
Yeah. How long was the academy when you went
Back
there?
then it was 17 weeks long.
Well, where was it at?
Right there on Shorecrest.
White Rock,
it's where Southwest
in
Airlines is now. Their headquarters is.
Okay. What was the emphasis in the academy back then? It was more physical, mental. We're going to get in, and I'm asking for a reason because I want to get to the evolution of training and how that evolved. And I had several officers that started in the 80s, going back to Dottie and Steve. I mean, we've had a lot of people on, and I just want to kind of talk about how training was then and what was important to the instructors.
It was very good. It was a lot of in your face. I remember David James, was a sergeant, came in and told us all the ways we were going to be fired on the first day, similar to what y'all probably remember from Hiram Burleson.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
My little cherubs.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was intimidating.
He was intimidating. That man sweating, he sweats. I mean, you're up there
He
watching
sweats
him.
when
and
he
going,
eats.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah. Yeah, the good thing is that was very much that way. But remember, they only had 17 weeks to get us prepared to go to the streets, and so that was a big deal. We had PT, DT almost every day. I remember that Bachman Lake was right across the street, and I am not a runner, or I wasn't at the time, and I'd have to run that thing all the time. Me and Brenda Bowen and Kelly Maples that were in my class, we were always the last ones to finish. I knew I was going to take a cold shower, but it was August, so I was happy to do that.
So did you hear that, everyone? Bachman Lake. So back then the academy was over in Bachman, yeah.
Yeah, it was just south of Bachman Lake. I mean, we walked across the street, and that's where the 3 miles started.
Wow. So what else did when you got into the academy, was it kind of what you expected? I know you had a relationship with the chief, and your father probably had a lot of friends on the department, but was there anything that took you by surprise?
No, they just said just listen and study, and that was it. I mean, it was pretty simple. The instructors that came through were all good. Mother Fickner, who was Ray Fickner, who was a city prosecutor at the time, she taught all of the search and seizure, penal code, and all that. She was amazing, and I think it's still that way at the academy too. The city attorneys are still teaching it, and they're very good at what they're doing.
We had Miss Maguki, remember her?
Yeah.
And she was intimidating in her approach.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. But Miss Middlebrook was a lot like Ray Fickner, Mother Fickner.
Okay.
Very caring, wanted to make sure you're getting the information, because Miss Middlebrook was really good. I think she probably taught all of y'all arrest, search, and seizure.
Probably. So when did you tell us about graduating? Like, how many did you start with and how many did you finish with?
We lost 5 in our class. I think we started with like 35 and we ended up with like 30. Graduation, they do this big badge pinning ceremonies nowadays. Back in our day, Prokoff sitting next to me, and he put my badge on me, and I put his on his, and we went to work that night. It was kind of that was the way it was, or the next night.
You mentioned going out working the beat that you were born in.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Oh, it was fun because I already knew all the streets. I knew all the locations. Some of these new guys that are going to listen to this, the MAPSCO. Y'all came on with MAPSCOs, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so the MAPSCO was your friend, and I already knew that. And so a different police officer had told me already, make sure you understand that Hampton splits the 24 and 2500 blocks of any east-west street. And so that was ingrained in us. And so it made it very good that I was in a neighborhood I knew. My grandparents still lived at that time at 1218 South Edgefield, which is just south of my beat, and I drove by it every single day. So I knew it well. My dad went to Adamson High School, and all his brothers, and so it was very familiar. So it was very nice for me. The only problem I had was that everybody thought I spoke Spanish. and I didn't.
That's really weird that they would expect you to speak Spanish with a name like Navarro.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, for the listeners out there, and I know right now there are some rookies in the academy that listen to the show because they reach out to me. Learn your geography. That is crucial in your early, and that's one of the hardest things. Learn the block splits and learn the major streets because it is that's imperative in for your all phases of training.
Yeah, when the assist officer comes out, you don't need to be trying to plug it into your deal.
Yeah.
So it tells you turn by turn how to get there. You need to know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your trainers.
My first trainer his name was Clark Foster, but he went by Bumpkin because he was from the country. He was outstanding trainer. There's times when I say, sometimes he taught me, he showed me, well, I don't think I can get away with this, but boy, he certainly could. But I remember the very first, literally, we cleared detail. I got in the car, and we got a aggravated robbery in progress at the First National Bank, I think it was at that time, Republic Bank maybe, but it's right there in North Oak Cliff. And the guy, he ended up later getting caught because he got on a bus, not a DART bus because DART wasn't there yet, but he got on a bus. But I remember him looking at me and says, because this was long before seatbelts, right? Nobody wore a seatbelt.
Yeah. And
he said, "Rookie, let your butthole suck the seat cover." And off we went. And it was the most
bumper sticker.
It was one of the most amazing things that ever happened to me, and I was like, I'm getting to do this and they're actually paying me? Oh my God. But it was wonderful. And Bumpkin, he knew North Oak Cliff because it's the same area that I worked later on, and he knew everybody. And he taught me that you really need to get out of your car and go talk to people. Don't just sit in the car the whole time. I went from there to another trainer that was not very good, and then I left him and went to Willie Hawkins. Willie was an outstanding person, great trainer. He was always trying to get me more cultured because he said, "You grew up in Duncanville, you need some culture." But he was really, really good and actually helped me tremendously.
How did you get your first backup weapon?
Yeah, that's a great story. Okay, so when I joined the police, I turned 20 on July the 11th, and they hired me on July the 23rd of 1981. Okay, so when I came out of the academy, I couldn't buy bullets. I couldn't buy any kind of extra gun or something. So I remember asking Clark or Bumpkin, I said, "Hey, I need a backup gun, like one of those little chief things that y'all have." So he took me. I think we went to Bill's Story, which is long gone, and he bought my backup gun because I could not buy it. But he told me, "Kevin, you need a backup gun because you're covering me." So, but Bumpkin took care of me on that, and he was. I could not have had a better first trainer.
I got a question for you about the backup gun.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you actually carry it?
Back in those days, we carried it on our ankles. Yeah.
Because I've seen some of these old school cops carried them in the back of in their belt.
Chuck Young.
Yeah, Chuck Young in the back
Rob
of the belt.
Grant.
Yeah.
Some guys just had one in their pocket. I'm like, you have a pocket gun? Like that's
Yeah.
some old school stuff when you just have a pocket gun.
Yeah, Rob Grant, both those Grant boys are amazing. They were in the senior class to mine.
Okay.
And so I've known him a long time.
Well, you've heard us talk about them a lot.
Everything you've said has been right on
Yeah.
the money.
Great human beings.
Yeah.
But I like to take an opportunity to kind of punch them in the crotch when I get a chance, just because I love them.
Yeah,
Randomly at 10 o'clock at night, we'll get a message from Joe in a group, and Grant will be in the group, and he's just giving it to him just like he did, 14 years ago.
Well, I don't want him to think I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Well, when we get off air, I'm going to tell you something about Rob Grant that he used to always do that you'll have to hang over his head.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry, listener. So how was it patrolling, where you grew up, and what did you have a knack for when you got out there? Would you just say, okay, I like this in policing and working the streets, and I'm not really that big on this?
Well, okay, I will tell you I was not big on writing tickets. Yeah. In my 5 years, 6 years in patrol, I think I wrote 25 tickets. But man, did they need them when I wrote it, But I was not a ticket writer. I was a call chaser. I was a dope chaser. I love chasing dope, and I know everybody in this room has chased dope. And and back in my day, we could chase everybody. So it was, you sit down the street from the dope house. and you just waited for somebody to leave, and you go light them up, and because trust me, they're going to commit a traffic violation. Light them up, and the chase is on. And we chased them all till the wheels fell off. Back
In the
those
chase,
days.
that's something that
Yeah.
a lot of the younger cats today they don't know what that is.
As the PVOC instructor for a long time, I went through that transition, so I know what that was like. But no, it was fun. My biggest knack was talking to people, because I've always had, my dad was in sales, all my family was in sales. I know how to sell, and which is for me a lot of times selling the penitentiary, selling going to jail, selling not fighting me, those kind of things. And as a cop, you're always trying to get people to come onto your side so that you don't have to fight them. I remember in my older days, I used to talk at the academy or teach at the academy, and I'd say, when I was a young recruit, I wanted to use all those things they gave me to put on my belt. And as you get older, you just want to use your brain and your mouth and nothing else, because it just makes it a lot better.
Well, it's a challenge too. The physical nature of this job is always going to be there, but if you can avoid that through talking to people and like you said, persuading them to view it from your perspective, there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, I mean, even early on, which helped me later on when I got to homicide, that it was all about talking to people. I mean, remember, we got to the church before everybody else did, and so that when people started getting there, we just started talking to whoever would listen to us. And the Navarro family is good at talking. Not everybody's good at listening or wanting to hear from us, but we'll just move to the next person. And I did that a lot. I did that a lot in my in my patrol years, because you're looking for somebody who might give you some information on what's happening around the corner, or that gang that's starting to develop over here. They're giving you the insight. And the more you can talk to people and build that trust with them, rapport, whatever you want to call it, you feel like you're actually making a dent out there, right?
Well, I think that is such a lost,
Skill.
It's a lost skill in policing today. I mean, I think so many people are buried in their phones, or and I get it, being so busy, call to call, and they handle one and move on. But learning to talk to people and being a good communicator. I mean, since I've known you, I mean, you just started the academy whenever I got out there. You've always been a good communicator, and you got better.
It was even rare 20 years ago.
Yeah,
It really was.
Yeah.
I
there's
think
not a lot of emphasis
I've
on
only
it.
known one street cop who can talk at that level that's the same as you. And that was Jeremiah Torres.
Yeah. And Jeremiah Torres was one of my driving instructors, and he worked at the academy before.
That guy can drive a fucking car. Yeah.
I taught him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy and funny. Golly, when you talked about him in your episode, I was like, God, I love that kid. Well, he's not a kid anymore, but he was back in those days.
Yeah.
How was the command staff in the early '80s there in Dallas PD?
It was interesting. We had a new chief that came in from L.A., Glenn King, and he was good. But, man, I mean, I didn't have really any opinion, because that was like, the grand poopah and, somebody that was, 100 years older
It's
than
like
me.
Ben Click whenever I heard on.
Exactly.
You don't feel that those ramifications from a bad decision or good decision. You're just kind of going along.
Actually, yes, absolutely. And, all I really cared about was who was my chief at my station and who my lieutenant was and who my sergeant was. And I will tell you that in my career, I never had a bad sergeant or a bad lieutenant. And that's rare, right? I mean, I've been very, very fortunate in my time. We'll talk about some of them.
Talked them to death. They didn't have a chance to be a bad sergeant or lieutenant.
Yeah, my favorite sergeant eventually was, and we'll talk about this later, but it was Wenzel. Because when Wenzel, you may not know this about Keith Wenzel.
I don't even know how that works, because he talks just as much as you. How does that work?
He doesn't. He's an introvert. People don't know this. I know this. But Keith was brought up by a parent that taught him that you don't talk when somebody else is talking. So that worked out really good in my favor.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
What was the relationship with Dallas PD and the community in the 80s?
It was interesting. It was very good, actually. We had just gone through that big lawsuit where the drivers and all that stuff and all those kinds of things. In my communities, which were what's interesting, when you work North Oak Cliff, you've got Kessler Park, and then you got the not Kessler Parks, right? And so in my north...
Still that way.
Yeah, it's still that way. But it's changing. Go to Bishop Arts and see how much it's changed.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea of it is, in my time, it was mostly at that time illegal aliens, okay, that were all working for H.P. Zachary Company, where they were building Central Expressway, and they all lived in North Oak Cliff. I mean, you pretty much knew where they worked if you would write a ticket or take somebody to jail or something like that. And but they were good, hardworking people who other people might rob them because they knew they had money on them on a Friday night and stuff like that.
Cash.
And so it took a lot of pride in the fact that we're protecting this area because these people are hardworking people.
Keep to themselves, hardworking.
That's right.
Yeah,
and you got people coming from the other side of town that are, taking advantage
victimizing them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was the morale of the department?
It was good when I first got here. It really was. It was pretty fun out there, and things came a few years later, and as other things started happening, and it got kind of bad, and the city council kind of turned more against just a couple of members did, but no, it was fun. Listen, I was 21 years. I was 20 years old. I mean, man, I was having fun. All that stuff never bothered me.
You were living the dream.
I was every day.
Well, you're so focused on your job, and the longer you stay on the department, the higher up you move, and just the more people that are in the command staff, because that is continuously changing. Also, your perspective changes on all that stuff. So when you're brand new on, like you said, you're a sergeant, you might know your lieutenant, you probably don't know the chief.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's just, hey, let's go chase some bad guys today, right? Like, let's find out what we can get into.
It was fun. I mean, it was fun. One of the things that on my training team, I became a trainer a little later on as a FTO. My training team was Roy Baird was the daytime sergeant. I mean, a guy. I was late nights, and then Brian Faulkner, who's a wonderful human being, was the other one. And one of the things we had this kind of thing. Robert Baird was an outstanding cop, and he produced an outstanding cop because that's Angela Arredondo that y'all know now, and she's a great cop. And so, but I remember, you're going to learn how to put people in jail with Rob Baird, because that's all he's going to do. He's going to go out and find out who's got warrants in my beat, and I'm going to go find them, and I'm going to put them in jail. And then when you went to Brian, you learned, writing tickets and things like that. But when you came to me, we're going to answer calls, and we answered a ton of calls. And if there's a way for us to get out of going to jail and have somebody else do it, we're going to do that too, because I want to answer another call.
Well, you get a variety of experiences doing that.
Yeah.
As you should.
Yeah.
You don't wanna
because
do
you're
the
going to
same
need
thing for however long, 27 weeks or whatever it was. But there's value in learning all of that too, right? So you've got to understand the difference of the calls and how you can handle each one of those. And then you've got to understand the traffic stops, and you've got to understand the jail process.
Yep.
Some people aren't as fortunate to get that. They get stuck with the same trainer basically over and over and over again, and you don't learn those finer points of the different things that you do on this job.
Absolutely.
I want to move on to something that, the show, everybody here that's involved, we really try to make a point when we get a chance to talk about the fallen and how they lived and how they gave the ultimate sacrifice for the city. And you had a relationship with someone that was killed in the line of duty, in Gary Blair. Can you talk about that and tell us about your friendship of who he was as an officer?
Yeah, Gary Blair was an outstanding police officer. He was a guy that you just gravitated to. He was good at what he did, and he loved action. He loved being, just being there to do it. And he was the first guy to come running whenever you called the assist, or if you marked on the traffic, he was going to drive by you, stop, talk. He was that guy. And there's a lot of those guys out there, but he was somebody that I truly loved. He was really good to us. What happened was, he had asked me, because in my college days, I worked at a Christian camp, and I was the wrangler. I'm the one that I rounded up the horses and took, rides, trail rides and stuff. And he knew that. And so he was involved in the TPOA. I think Curtis. JT Curtis was in that with us, and but he asked me, would you come do this wild horse race with us? And I said, what is it? He says, well, you're going to put a saddle on a wild horse while we hold it, and then you're going to ride it to the under an arena. And I went, okay, that sounds fun, right? I'm 24 24 years old, 23 years old. And so I did that. And we went to the Dallas Rodeo. It was the first one that I've ever been in, and we won. And so now I'm a rodeo guy. And so Gary's the one that helped me through all that, taught me how to ride bulls, taught me how to ride a bareback horse and those kinds of things. And it was that built our relationship. It was really good.
Why did we do so much dumb stuff when we were younger, just jumping on animals we had no business being on? And it's weird that when you wake up, your back hurts every once in a while.
Yeah, it was. But trust me, I will tell you this: I'll ride a bull any day before I'll ride a bareback horse ever again. They're so much faster. It's scary.
Can you tell us about March 20th, 1986?
Yeah, it's. So I was at home. I lived at the time in the Duncanville area, and I was at home. And Gary Blair called me. Now this is before. This was long before cell phones. Okay, and so Gary calls me at my house, and because he had shoulder surgery like a year or so before, and he was going to get back into rodeoing. So he needs his equipment back because I'm using all his equipment. And he says, Kevin, I'm gonna come get you in the morning. I'll pick you up at 8, and we're gonna go down to Ennis to Barstow Rodeo, and we're gonna buy you a bull rope. So it's great, absolutely. He hangs up. He's at the 7-Eleven at at Colorado and Beckley or Zane. Okay, he was at that 7-Eleven. We all knew it well. That's where we hung out. There was a time we actually had to go into 7-Elevens or fire stations in order to make calls. Okay, because there was no cell phones. He leaves there and sees somebody on traffic and stops that car on traffic. I will not say who. I will never say who he stopped or who was with him because I don't believe in ever mentioning that side, right? So he stops his car on traffic. They go just about a block and a half up the street, 1441 North Zanes. And it was an interesting place because you went straight down into the parking lot. And it was outside, but it was down. If you're driving by there, you wouldn't see that, right? And so he goes down there, and in the process, he gets into a fight with one of the guys that he later ends up killing with his backup weapon. The fight ensues. In the process of this fight, and this is from lots of witnesses' accounts, another man joins in. That other man that joined in was seen kicking Gary and stuff like that and was yelling stuff like, take his gun, take his gun. And guys, y'all understand what the weapons and more importantly, the holsters are of today. That was not the holsters that we used.
You're referring to the retention and
Yeah.
And how the pistol is able to be retained by the officer and not be taken.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I first came on, it was just a single strap. And when you were in a foot chase, you always went and looked for where the officers lost their guns because you would do it. But at a little better one, but at that time we could carry just about anything we wanted. And Gary had a 45 long Colt revolver, okay? And the guy got it from him. He took Gary's gun in the middle of this fight. And when he did, he ended up shooting Gary just above the vest, right through the throat. Gary fell back, went to his backup gun that was on his ankle, and then fired several shots and shot and killed the person who shot him. The other guy ran off. Come to find out later on, he was actually in the crowd watching all that, the person that ran off. And it was just a really bad deal. I remember being at my house, and my next door neighbor was a Dallas cop. His name's Mark Jenkins. And we rodeoed together as well. But he, good friend. He came over and knocks on my door, and he says, "Hey, Gary Blair just got killed." I said, "There's no way." I just talked to him. I think 10 minutes ago, I was on the phone with him. There's no way he could have died. And he had. And, of course, I went straight to the hospital. Very sad day. And it was just – it was weird because the emotions of that had not hit me yet. And matter of fact, it didn't hit me for several days, and you can ask me about it if you want to. But Gary's life was over, and it was a crazy thing.
I'm going to ask you that. Tell us how you coped with that and how you got through that.
Interestingly enough, John Westphalen and some of those guys handled the investigation. Ron Waldrop, who was my lieutenant in homicide, who is probably the best lieutenant I ever worked for, amazing man. But they did the investigation. We were involved in some of that, right? Because even though I wasn't there, some stuff started to come up that we needed to talk about, right? And they started preparing for his funeral, And I was one of the pallbearers with, Pat Welsh and Julian Bernal, who became a chief, and just people that, knew Gary very well and loved Gary. It was the first time I'd ever been involved in a police funeral. I don't know how you guys that do it all the time, especially the SWAT guys that are always there, and it's tough. And the honor guard, what they do, of course there was no honor guard back there, but it was tough. But I never broke down, because you're around the family, you're around, and it's just everything's going.
You have a job to do.
You have a job to do, right? And I came on at a time where policemen don't cry. Policemen don't, show that emotion. You just have to, and trust me, there was no avenue for that at all. And so I remember coming home, one morning, and because I worked late nights, I came home, and I just remember walking into a dark room and just sitting there, and it was I finally broke down. The funeral had happened, some stuff started coming out that we'll talk about, but I just broke down and cried, and it's like I couldn't let anybody see that. I mean, I just couldn't. I didn't even let my wife at the time know that was happening, because it's just not something that you do. I'll never forget it at the funeral. My sister, who I'm very close with, she came up and gave me and it's starting to bother me now, gave me the best hug I ever got in my entire life from anybody, because it was the trauma that I was going through, that she knew I was going through, that she knew I needed to get out, but I couldn't get it out. And it was a few days after that I realized I'm glad I made it through.
At the time, and we talked quite frequently about culture change.
Yeah.
The culture as a police officer is a lot like a soldier. You're not to have emotion, and because you have to continue the job and the mission.
Yeah.
There was no wellness unit at the time, and there was no talk of anything like this about feelings and in processing incidents, and also dealing with losing a friend and a peer, an officer.
Yeah. No, nothing like that at all. Thankfully, I have a very close family that supported me through that, and then my church family. I mean, I was very, I taught Sunday school to high school kids and stuff, and all those kind of things helped me process, because I was always thinking that Gary would want me to keep on going and doing what I'm doing, and I think we all think that about officers, through the years, and so, but I never go by. I did it today. When I go by the memorial here in downtown, I always go by and make sure I see the 4500, because this badge number was 4500, and I always want to see that up there, because it kind of gives me some peace.
I want to talk about the trial. Can you tell us about this? The trial for is actually the other person that ran away.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So the person who actually shot him, he did shoot and kill himself. But that second person was charged, John Westphalen and Ron Waldrop and all them. They charged him with capital murder because he aided, right? And so, and I think it's important to say that the person who did that was a black man, and Gary was a white officer, and we were kind of in some tension times in the city. We've had a couple things happen. A black lady was killed on her front porch. That probably could have not happened.
It's in South Dallas, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I think her name was Etta Collins, and I think it's important to say that. So there was a lot of tension, and the city council was getting pretty animated, or two people in the city council were getting very animated about DPD is just going rogue. They're shooting everybody. There's stuff like that going on, and so we're getting ready to go to trial, and it comes out that a Dallas officer who was trained by Gary Blair wrote a long article or long letter about how he expected this to happen because Gary was rogue and didn't,
He would push people to violence. Is that what he?
Absolutely.
That's what he said.
Absolutely, that's what he said, and so far from the truth. He wasn't like that. I mean, I covered him many times and stuff, and many officers that worked for him, before that. I mean, they would tell you he was a great trainer. He was kind of hard on you because what he was hard on you is about officer safety. Don't put your gun towards all those kinds of things. But he was good and fair. And so what happened was two city council members started a petition to support the person that was on trial for assisting in killing Gary. It was very traumatic for the morale of the department, for family members, for those of us that were close to Gary. And then when we got ready to go to trial, he actually testified for the defense. And I will say that his testimony led to an acquittal of the person who assisted in it. And that was very, very hard. And the fact that you had two Dallas City Council people that were actively raising money to defend him was hard for most of us to understand.
Because your job is to go and serve the city, and they are the city government, and I would imagine the morale just went down, plummeted.
Yeah, it was. It was very tough, and I'll tell you, there was two other recruits that wrote stuff, right? But he didn't write it bad. And what happened was, back in those days, after you finished a training cycle, you had to go back to the academy, and then you had to write about your FTO. One of the things you always had to write is something that he needed to improve, or area that you didn't feel like he was doing as well. And man, that's tough if you have to write it, and they won't let you go out unless you write something. And so those other two guys that were on that same training team, I always felt bad for them because, what a tough situation to be in. Now they're dragging something up that you wrote because somebody told you had to, and now it's being used in a trial like that. And I know both of those officers that did that, and they're outstanding officers, great supervisor, one of them is, and just wonderful, wonderful human beings. But going back to wellness, I cannot imagine what they were going through, and they had nobody to turn to. Nobody to turn to.
What happened to that officer who testified on behalf of the defendant? Did he stay on the department much longer or leave?
For a little bit. You can read about it. There's stuff out there on him, and I won't even say his name. But the idea of it is, he left about a few months later. He got upset because they were going to move him to a desk job because they just didn't think he needed to be out there every day, and he was older when he came here. He was 30 years old. This sounds really weird.
Well, it is older for someone getting on at
and
the
I
academy.
think he had been an insurance salesman, and it was probably very much a culture shock. He's a Canadian, came down south, and I think it was quite a culture shock for him to be in what we knew as the war on crime here. But it's just it was a tough time.
This happened in '86. When was the trial?
Later that year, believe it or not.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that quick.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And just as you walked in to record this morning, we actually have a framed piece in the wellness unit, and it has Gary Blair, but it has all these other officers that in this time frame from 85 to 89 that were killed in the line of duty.
Yep.
It was a lot. And this one just kind of kick off going towards 88. We know 88, how many officers?
Yeah.
We've talked about it before.
Yeah, it was a very tough time. And I won't say that training played any role in it, but I will tell you that things were changing in training at that point in time. And let me tell you, if you don't mind, I'll talk just a moment about it.
Sure.
But because I've talked about it in all my classes. But the idea of it is that it was cutting-edge training. There was a guy by the name of Jack Parrott who kind of was the leader of it. And it really was very good training, but we didn't know what it might do to people. So two things were taught at the same time. At the academy, we were teaching shoot, don't shoot, okay? It was kind of like the real leading edge of what RBT is, that you and I worked on together and y'all have done. And I'll explain that. But the other part of it was that we at the academy, at the pistol range, we were teaching instinct shooting. And the theory of it is, I know Joe's sitting over there and I just point to him, my bullet is going to go that way. And what happened during that time is that we got really good at hitting what was shooting at us, right? It was just that kind of way. So the idea of it was you were teaching this shoot, don't shoot class at the same time you're doing that. And we saw our shootings kind of go up. I don't honestly think it had anything to do with the training because the training was good. But let me tell you what the training was. And Joe, I know me and you talked about this because I said, we're not going to shoot on everything in RBT, right?
Right.
Yeah, as we kind of started developing and nurturing that program.
Why don't you just say what RBT is real quick for everyone?
Reality-based training, and there's several ways to do reality-based training, but what I'm talking about is force-on-force simulations where you use a pistol that has been changed.
It's been modified.
You can't shoot a real bullet through it, but it was like you were shooting a bullet. And what it was is it was a marking cartridge that had, I think it was colored soap in it. And there's a lot of people that worked in our program that will tell you that it hurts when it hits you.
It flies about 400 feet a second.
It does.
It's painful.
It is, but it was pre that. So here's what happened. I went with Gary Blair to the training. So you're on duty. We were working late nights. You drive up, and I'm pretty sure it was Flagpole Hill up around White Rock Lake, and Jack Parrott meets you there, or somebody else will meet you there, and they take your gun, because we were all shooting. We didn't have electric guns then, those semi-automatics. We only had
electric guns.
We only had revolvers. So they take your revolver away from you and give you one that had blanks in it. I'm sure they checked all that before, but they didn't show you. You just put it in your deal.
Just trusted them.
Yeah. Exactly. They push you in the room, and now you got a guy that's got a gun to his head, and they're yelling at you. Hey, he just shot himself in that goon, and they push you to the next one. And you had like 8 or 10 of those, and you went from the next one to the next one to the next one. No debrief. No, this is what you did wrong. Just yelling at you stuff. And then you came out on the other end, and they said, here's your gun back. Now go back to work. I'm guessing there's some old guys out there that remember this very well, but that's the way I remember it. And I remember Gary and I, and there was some other Southwest guys, so we decided, we can't go right back to work. I mean, you are hyped up. And so we went to Hall and Thomas and got some Henderson's chicken and did what real Southwest officers do.
Yeah, right. So I want to get into, we just talked about your growing up in the Cliff, or working in the Cliff, and then moving on to having fun in the streets and answering calls, and then experiencing tragedy with a great friend and peer on the department. But your ultimate goal has always been to be a homicide detective, and back then, it's different now. You kind of had to go the route of going to other units and getting experience as a detective before you get a chance to go to homicide.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us about the other units whenever you applied to be a detective?
Yeah. As soon as I had the opportunity, I applied, and I got taken on the first round, and it was I went to assaults, and assaults back in those days was family violence didn't have a unit, sexual assaults didn't have a unit, so you handled
everything.
You had everything, right? They're either dead and homicide has them, or we get them. That was the way it was. Right after I got there, they made a sexual assault unit, which was I appreciated that, because I just think a sexual assault victim deserves a lot of attention.
Well, specialized too. Not everybody can do that type of job.
Yeah, and so, but I was in the assault unit. I was changed by Charlie Bruton, who was a great trainer. And I remember he kept telling me, settle down, son, because I remember we went out to get some lunch, and, back in those days, you go to lunch and dinner, because, it's city time. So, but we went out, and I wanted to get back to the station to see if they put anything in my little tray. And I remember when the first day I actually got a case in my tray, and I was like, oh, yes, I got a case. And I pulled it out, and I went and picked the phone up, and he slapped my hand and said, no. You got to let it cure a couple of days. Right now, everybody's mad. Let it go a couple of days. And if you have a suspect on it, certainly, because they'll probably just say, I don't care, especially in like Class C assault. But yeah, I learned a lot, and I worked with some really good guys. Steve David was right there with me, and I mean, some guys that no one here would know who they are because they're long gone. But it was an old unit, but it was a fun time.
And what year was that?
I went there in June of '87. June of '87.
And how long were you there before you applied for homicide?
Well, actually, back in those days, you didn't apply for homicide. They came and got you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what happened was, after I'd been there about a year, and again, this was all not in this building here at the police headquarters. It was downtown at 106 South Harwood, where Oswald was killed in the basement.
That's where I did my PT test, in that basement.
Oh, really? That's really good. Yeah, but so that's where we were at that time. And so for about a year, they came up with this new thing that whoever was in assaults would stay 1 extra hour, which you came in and worked 4 to midnight. Everybody else worked 3 to 11, and then somebody in homicide stayed. Well, I was lucky that the person that was P.E. Jones. So P.E. and Jones and I went on a tremendous amount of shootings, cases together. And if they died, he got them. If they stayed alive, I got them. And it was really kind of fun, and I learned a lot in that year. And I have no doubt Bobby Hammer, who was my trainer over in homicide, and P.E. Jones, those two guys taught me so much. And I know they had a help in getting me over to the unit.
Yeah, Palmer talked about P.E.
Yeah.
In his episode. Can you describe what investigator versus detective title, that was?
Yeah, very, very much so. Okay, when I came on the police department, there was a detective, but it was a rank. It was actually a rank. So you had to be, and it's like a supervisor rank. So that's how that was. Well, so when I went to Capers, we were called investigators. As a matter of fact, I had a badge that had investigator written on it. I need to rebuy that badge. Yeah,
dig that up.
But the idea of it was we were investigators. Well, you go out to the areas we go out, and you say I'm an investigator. They're like, well, you with the insurance company? Are you with Social Security? That kind of stuff. I'm like, no, I'm an investigator. So we all wanted to change it to detective, but we couldn't until the last detective retired. And about that time is also when the senior corporal rank came about. And so when that senior corporal rank came about, they just made us detectives.
Because prior to it was corporal.
Yeah.
Okay.
We used to call it a straight bar corporal because you got this little straight bar.
Dackel was the only corporal left at Southeast when I got out there. He was out, just one little single bar chevron.
Yeah. But so that's how the detective came in, and we were all so happy because it just sounds so much better, detective.
Yeah. An investigator.
Yeah.
So when did you get to homicide?
I went there in June of 1989, and it was already kind of a pretty bloody time was coming, but 89 we had 451 murders, 90 we had 491 murders, and in 1991 we've had more we've ever had, 501 murders.
And I think that's still the record.
It's
here.
still a record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were just getting into homicide whenever this is going on. Can you tell the listener why? And we've talked about it before, but you were actually in homicide when this was going on.
Yeah, and trust me, Southeast officers know it all too well. But what happened was at that time, Jamaica had been in war for a long time, and they were sending all these young kids to New York. I don't know what it was. They all lived in Brooklyn on Ocean Street. Every single one of them. That's where they went through. And they were coming to Dallas, and they were taking over the drug business. And I'm not kidding. These kids have been in war in their country when they were little. So at 14, it didn't bother me one bit to shoot your kneecaps off because you were short one day. And or shoot 4 people in a bathtub, or shoot somebody and put them in especially if it was somebody local, shoot them, put them in the trunk of the car and set the car on fire. That was how vicious it was. And any of those officers working. I'll never forget, there was a guy, and I don't know if y'all will know who he is, but his name was Troy Smith.
I know Troy.
Yeah.
Yes, we know Troy.
Troy,
very well.
Troy worked late nights in South Dallas. I love that guy because he could find so much good stuff for me, and he always knew where to point me to go.
Remind me to tell you a funny Troy Smith story.
Oh, absolutely. But a great cop because he got out of the car and he made sure he knew what was going on. And he actually led me to the very first informant I had in South Dallas who cleared a tremendous amount of cases for me.
He would open a can on you too.
Yeah.
Troy,
he would.
One. Yeah.
And I understood exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about with Kowalski, with Bob Owens, and hell, even Clack, about the Jamaican drug wars that went on here in that time frame. How strained were y'all in homicide when it come to just a caseload?
Yeah,
well,
how many detectives did you have?
Yeah, we probably had about, we had like maybe 20, okay, detectives. But I'm not kidding you. P.E. Jones and I would be, or either P.E. Jones or Bobby Hammer and I would always be on call back together. And I'm not kidding you when I say we were called out every single night. And it's usually not just for one murder, because there was another murder that happens along the way. And it was just crazy. Or maybe it wasn't a murder. Somebody else got shot.
Sure. Retaliation or whatever.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it got to the point where if you were shot and you weren't dead yet, we're not going, because we got this one here that's got to go. And an interesting thing that happened during that time, Pine and Colonial and those kinds of areas in South Dallas, we would go to a murder one night. The next night we would go to the murder of the guy we were looking for the murder from the night before.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing's changed. It's all the
Yeah,
same.
it's similar.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was
Close the
absolutely
case.
crazy. I got real good at making death notifications. Because
How did you do with those?
it was
Ultimate cell right there.
it was
Wow.
tough. It was interesting because just a little back history. We raised in the same house as my brother and my sister, and somehow my brother had that Navarro side that wasn't about helping people, and he was a wonderful human being, but he got involved in the drugs. So during that time period, I remember my parents worrying a lot that they're going to get that knock on the door, and it's going to be somebody looking for my brother that might hurt them, or that just all those things that go with a family member being involved in. And he went to prison twice for drugs. Okay, so I mean, I had that going on while I was working the streets and stuff like that. But it did help prepare me, because I do believe God puts you in different places for a reason. And my brother did. He made amends to all that and lived this last 25, 30 years as a beautiful human being, helping people all the time. And he passed about 3 years ago. But the idea of it is he overcame that. It just took a little while, right? Because he found the right side of the Navarro, because the other side of the Navarro, because I had two uncles that went to prison too. So we understood that side. But the idea of it is that, sorry, I think I forgot where I'm going.
Death notifications.
Oh, yeah. What I used was that I knew what that family member that's at that house was going through, because they knew their person was involved in drugs. And so I would always use that. I'll never forget one lady in South Dallas, really sweet, and it was a grandmother, so y'all kind of understand this, right? A grandmother who was raising the kid, and she grabbed my hand, and she knew I was struggling telling her that he was dead. And she grabbed my hand and she goes, "The Lord knows I tried with that kid. Nothing else I could do. And I told her, but for the grace of God go we, us." He was born into that, and that's what he did. And Grandma, you did a great job of doing your best to try to shelter him from that. And so that's what I usually took out of making those death notifications. It was not fun, but it was something you had to do. It was part of the job. And we always wanted to do it with the dignity and respect that I don't care if he's a gangbanger or if he robs a store and got shot, that family member still needs that dignity.
Kevin, you're living your lifelong dream, homicide detective. What'd you enjoy most about it?
I will say the teamwork, for one thing, because nobody lived in an island in homicide. And there was always competition between, as I always like to say, the A team that I worked on. We had Thursday, Friday, Saturdays off, and the other teams. You're always kind of trying to jockey to who's the best unit, but teamwork, and if I'm just totally honest, getting in a room with anybody, whether you're the witness or the suspect. The suspects are the funnest, and walking in there knowing I'm coming out with a confession. I mean, that was the greatest thing I ever did in my career, is to go in and walk out with a statement. And my day was before the cameras and stuff were in there, and everything was handwritten. And when you have the education I have, because I'm not the smartest guy in the when it comes to the academics, sometimes they would say words and I'd have to change those because I couldn't spell that word they just said.
And there was no Google.
There was none.
You were there for 7 years.
Yes.
And you had the lead on 108 murders.
Yes.
And it says here you had an 80% clearance rate.
Yes.
So I looked up the average clearance rates for the nation, and it hovers around the 50s.
Yeah.
And Dallas Homicide has long had a reputation of having a much higher clearance rate. What do you attribute that to?
I'll attribute it from my time to Ron Waldrop, the lieutenant there. I mean, he was all about you learn how to interview people, and we're going to solve these cases. I mean, he really did. I mean, it was drilled into me between P.E. Jones and Jack Allison and all those guys. You got to get the statement, because every juror wants to hear that guy's story that he did it, right? Because you're going to send this guy away a long time, right? Yeah, it was drilled into us. It was cultural.
It seems like a lot of the things on the police department are cultural.
Yeah.
And when you see the units that are highly successful, it's been a culture of success for a long time, and it's almost not even permitted to not go there and excel at what you're doing.
Agreed. Back in my day when Claggett went there, I mean, Claggett was an outstanding operator, and so was Baker and all the other guys that came before you did. But there was a whole group before them that I remember, Steve Menace and those guys. It was just a culture of we're going to be the best. And if you can't, you won't be here. Y'all know that. You lived there.
That was the same like with SIU as well.
Yeah.
Joe Decourt was over there
Yeah.
for a long time.
Yeah.
He had monopoly on those investigations.
Yeah. One thing I will say about my clearance rate is, it is high. It really is. But I remember when I went over there, because I went over there in June of '87, and it was hopping, man. It was really hopping. And I remember the first two cases I got, they said, hey, give that one to Navarro, it's a lay down. Give him that one to Navarro, it was lay down. But my third one was a pure ass mystery, and those were not fun, Yeah, so, but it was because we had a good team, and we had good people that could, and I was trained by P.E. Jones and Bobby Hammer and Jack Allison and Chuck Hudson, these guys that taught me how to talk to people. I remember P.E. Jones was the first person that came to me and said, Kevin, you're very charismatic. I want you to touch this guy at some point in time in this interrogation. I looked at him like he was crazy, right? And he said, no, if you can touch him and he'll allow you to, he'll confess to you. And I'll be danged if he wasn't spot on.
How far in your homicide career were you when PE said that to you? Or was this
about my
assault?
third case? About my third
Okay.
case.
Okay.
Yeah. PE didn't have to do that. PE was so good at playing the person that he was. I mean, you just wanted to trust PE always, and so I thought it was crazy because I had not seen that before, and but I did it, and it was like amazing. And then I trained Ken Penrod and taught him, hey, Ken, this is what you do. And God, he got so good at it. Ken Penrod was an outstanding interrogator.
Even P.E. Jones, he had the reputation. I remember I'm pretty sure it was the guy that was on the side of the road wrapped up in carpet.
Yeah.
And he showed up, and I was like, man, this is going to be a killer case, right? Like, this is all you have is carpet on the side of the road with a dead body wrapped up in it. And I was like, it's P.E. Jones. Like, he's going to figure this out. And weeks later, I'd get a notification that there was somebody that, he figured out who did, and it actually went to a different part of the city, and the guy had tried to rob a dope house, and they ended up wrapping him up in the carpet. They shot him in and I was like, holy, like, how do you figure this stuff out? I have no clue, right? I'm a young patrol officer, so I was just enthralled, but I knew his reputation.
Yeah.
And when I saw he came out on, I was like, oh, this one's going to be a doozy. Let's see how it goes. And sure enough.
Well, I will tell you that homicide today is just as good as we were back in those days. They just have to deal with things we didn't have to deal with, cell phones and social media and cameras everywhere. And we didn't have that back in my day. And that can both be a hindrance and it can be a help. But the guys that are there today are just as good as we were.
Yeah, the fact that they can, your social media and your phones and everything else might come into play, but you still have to look at all of it on every case now. And the court system is demanding that you show that you actually did all of it, and the jurors don't believe you anymore. They want to see all of that stuff, and you're just like, man, that's so much for. I get it. Like, occasionally it works, but then the other times it doesn't. You're still having to go through all that information.
I still believe in our specialized units. That's where you get the cream of the crop most of the time. Okay, and that's why our specialized unit, including this wellness unit, has the cream of the crop in it. I saw who you have. I mean, Massey's out there, and that's good people. And you're led by a tremendous team between Tina Schultz and Lizette Rivera. And the specialized units, that's why SWAT is still as good today as they were way back in the day. You're just better because you're better trained and you know more. But I believe that cop work, sometimes it gets harder because they take rules and change them a little bit. But the cops that are out there today are just as good, and they're getting it done. Now, it may not be the same case in all units, but any specialized unit, detectives and these units and SWAT, I mean, we got the best SWAT team in the world. I really still believe that.
Well, and I think that goes further back into the work that patrol officers do.
Yeah.
You know, you learn which direction you want to go, and you hone your skills in patrol. And we've got great patrol officers that, I mean, you can't be successful as a detective if you don't have decent patrol officers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why did you decide you wanted to change from homicide? I mean, that was your dream. You spent 7 years there, and then you went to the academy.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really honest here. One of the things that happened to me was I ended up going through a divorce. A lot of it my own fault. And when you're in homicide, I remember Waldrop told me one time, I said, why do we always fight so much amongst ourselves? He says, because I got a bunch of racehorses in here and they all want to be first. You all understand this in SWAT.
Yeah. Type A personalities and everything else.
And I said, and he said, it was explained to me, sometimes you get that God complex that I can do this. Nobody else can do it, but I can do this, right? And so the idea of it is, I kind of got off tracks on who I was as a father. I mean, not as a father, but as a father, as a husband, as a partner and all that. And basically, I remember my good friend, Gary Kirkpatrick, who was my sergeant at the time, says, hey, listen, man, you're not on your best on your game. You ought to consider doing something else right now. And I did. I said, you're absolutely right. And Joe Decourt came and said the same thing to me. I said, okay, it's time for me to get out. And at that time, I've already been through a divorce, and I'm getting ready. I'm dating another person who I'm now married to and have been for 28 years. And I had 3 kids now because she had 2, and we brought to the marriage, you know. I left, and I went 1 year to the audit unit. I didn't even know what they did, but I just knew it was a good avenue out. It was right across the hall, actually. And I worked for Bud Green. Oh, he was wonderful. I don't know if y'all know Bud Green, but he was an outstanding supervisor. But I worked there for 1 year. And then Roger Martin called me and said, hey, I could use you in service training. And that's when I went.
How did you adjust to that, going to the in-service academy?
Oh, man, it was, well, first when I got there, I'll never forget, I've been on TV a lot, you know, because, you know, they stick that camera in your face and say, tell us what happened, right? And so I'd done that a lot, and I testified in lots of trials with lots of people there, news cameras, whatever. And I was very comfortable in that world. And I'll never forget the first time I was at the academy, I had to go up in the front of the room and say, guys, turn your beepers on vibrate. And the bathrooms were down the hall. And I was scared to death because it was people that I knew that were looking at me, not you know, the general public or whatever. And so when I first went there, and I used this in my instructor's class, I was scared to death standing in front of people talking in that realm. But I kind of overcame that, and I got to where I was very comfortable in front of the classroom. And it came pretty quick, because one thing I will tell you is Roger Martin was my sergeant at that place. And Roger's been a mentor to me for many, many things. We worked in homicide together, but he was on the other shift, so I never really saw him. He was a sergeant in homicide. But he brought me out to the academy, and then he sent me to the training that, believe it or not, I had never been to an interrogation school that was, you know, a canned presentation. They sent me to Reed. They sent me to Rabin's school. They sent me to Wicklander's. And so I left homicide and went to training. Yeah, I got trained to how to talk to people.
Do your job.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the city way. But the idea of it is that then I got to develop my own class based on that. But Roger Martin, who was also the person that took me to hunt oil, has been a very important part of my life.
What was the in-service academy like whenever you got out there?
It was good, actually. It wasn't the best, but it was good. And Matt Nagy had created a PVOC.
About what year was this?
I left homicide in 1996 and went and worked 1 year to 97. And in June of 97, I went to the academy as an in-service instructor.
So I contacted some of your former coworkers and just told them that we were going to talk and asked if there was anything they wanted to get out to you.
I never heard y'all do that until you did it to Canetti's, and it was like really. But I'm glad y'all did. That was really good.
Well, let's see how it
may not be
goes
so
here.
good for me.
Starts off with Kevin is a longtime friend and colleague. Kevin's influence on the Dallas Police Department is indeed profound. The state of Texas has specific requirements for both basic law enforcement training and in-service training. In addition to basic training, officers in Texas have a requirement of 40 hours of ongoing training within each 2-year training cycle. Historically, the Dallas Police Department has done a good job with basic training and field training. In contrast, during my early years at DPD, in-service training was at best an ignored afterthought, and at worst, there was some in-service training that promoted law enforcement complacency. Then Kevin arrived at the DPD in-service training unit. Kevin brought much-needed energy and enthusiasm that made the training relevant and meaningful for all Dallas police officers. Kevin also brought the rare ability to have an idea for training and then see that idea through to implementation. Among Kevin's successes, and in collaboration with many others, was the creation of an interrogation training program that was named Interrogation 360. This program was highly successful. It has been presented to law enforcement professionals from all over the world and at many law enforcement conferences. Kevin often brought me along to the conferences to make presentations. Prior to one 2-hour presentation, we agreed that Kevin would speak for the first hour. We would give the group a 10-minute break, and then I would finish up. Kevin stepped up to the podium, drew in a deep breath, and then spoke uninterrupted for an hour and 50 minutes.
That's true.
His enthusiasm caught the group's undivided attention. We both enjoyed a good laugh when he realized he had lost track of time. I'm honored to be longtime friends and colleagues with Kevin Navarro. The improvements and influence that Kevin brought to in-service training at DPD has no doubt saved the lives, saved careers, and improved morale. Thank you, Kevin. John Palmer.
That's awesome. Thank you, John. Yeah, I have a lot of deep love for John Palmer. And I'll tell you, I've known a lot of men in my life. I don't think I've ever met one as kind and generous as he is.
Great guy.
Oh, yeah. I think the listener heard that, how genuine and just sweet of an individual he is.
Yeah.
And just how intelligent and dedicated he was to this job.
Yeah, he is he is an amazing person.
So we're going to get into a lot of these classes that you either revamped or just created out of thin air and brought to the Dallas Police Department. Tell us about PVOC. Tell the listener what that is.
The Police Vehicle Operations course. It was there when I got there. Reed Higgins, who was on your episode with, great guy, saved me on at least one wreck in my patrol days back when he was an A&I. But he was running it when I came there, and he was getting ready to leave. So Roger Martin told me, "You're going to be the new police driving instructor for squad cars." And I went, I was in homicide and I was in detective, and I've been gone from the streets for 10 years. He goes, "Don't worry about it. You'll do fine. I'm sending you to a school." So they sent me to FLETC, and that's where PVOC in my life started. I will tell you that the very first class I had anything to do with was probably one of the best classes that I've ever seen with DPD. When you look at who commanders are, Castro was in that class, Lonzo Anderson was in that class, Gil Garza, Monique Alex. I mean, you're talking about a lot of bosses that were in that class.
253.
Yes, it was like one or two behind yours, right?
It was one behind me.
Yeah. They were a good class, and I got to do the homicide module for them. But I actually went through PVOC with them as a recruit. And Joe, you'll remember this. They won't, because I took care of them. I had to wear a helmet during PVOC.
Yeah, we wore those old 1990 motorcycle helmets.
Yeah, it was miserable.
Sitting in the car in that.
And it was August.
Yeah.
So y'all didn't have to do that because Kevin took that out of the program the first thing. But yeah, that was that was my introduction. I went to FLETC for a 2-week driver instructor training school, and then I went back a year later for the pilot program of the advanced driver training program. But yeah, it was really fun.
Did we discuss what FLETC is already?
FLETC is John Palmer works for him. So, but for this episode, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, It's in Glencoe, Georgia, but they have several different branches, but that's the main one. And it's probably, it's all with the exception of the FBI and the DEA, it's where every single law enforcement agency with feds that's their main academy.
You created 3 new exercises for PVOC. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was pretty fun. So when I went to FLETC, they had a course called the Cumulative Skills course. And remember, Matt Nagy had it before me, and he created everything that you see out there. Matter of fact, he's the one that designed that track. And the idea of it was good stuff. I mean, it really was good stuff. And but I wanted to add to it because there was no pursuit driving, there was no nighttime pursuit driving, and there was no cumulative skills test. And basically, that was I'll just say it how I usually say it to everybody else. It was a 30 coupon ride at the fair. I mean, it was one of the funnest things. Y'all two remember doing it, right?
That is the biggest thing I remember out of PVOC is flexing our shift, because you're doing 8 to 5 or whatever at the academy, but coming in at night to be on the fairgrounds in the middle of the night with a helicopter out there and a bunch of instructors driving some Mustangs and everything else and us chasing them in squad cars. Yeah. We don't have badges yet. We don't have real guns, but we have a squad car with lights and sirens, and we are driving the wheels off, chasing these guys.
Yeah, that was good times, and that was what I came back.
Hell of training right there.
The one thing I had to do is I had to justify all that, and then send it up the chain. And I mean, I spent a lot of time in my office writing why we needed to do this, and it all got through. It was great. I will tell you, Winslow and I talked about this just the other day. I was very blessed when I got there. Roger Martin was great, and he made sure I knew what I needed to know, right? But not too long after that, we had something that was like the 3 Gs. And this is what he and I talked about, the 3 Gs. This was back when we didn't have 3G on our cell phones, right? But it was Danny Garcia was our 2-star chief. Gasaway was our 1-star chief, and Gil Garza was our lieutenant. And the 3 Gs made sure that me and Wenzel got everything we needed to create new training. I mean, it was all about create new stuff. And that's one thing that I was fairly good at, taking something that nobody had done before and creating that. And I think you'll see that as we go along. But PVOC was a good time. I will say that when I took over there, it was not a very diverse group. It was like one white female who worked at the academy, one black male who was a sergeant at the academy, and then a bunch of white guys that was teaching this stuff. And it was really weird because they only would teach, I only teach this, or I only teach that, I only teach that. And when I took it over, I said, I'm sorry, but if you can't teach every part of it, then why are you here? That'd be like, in SWAT. Well, I only teach ramming the door. I can't teach, shooting or whatever. So no, you got to know it all, right? So that was one of the big changes that I made, along adding those particular deals, exercises.
I'm reading here that Joey Fox ended up being a part of it.
Yeah, Joey Fox. Joey Fox was a great cop, and he was a great SWAT operator. And then he left because he became a lawyer, and he left for a little while, and he came back. And I'll never forget, he had to go all the way back to the academy. And I was like, oh, my God, bless his heart. And I'd actually dealt with him on something else back before when he was a sergeant at Central. And but he came through, and immediately, I mean, I didn't even let him get out to training and stuff. He said, you're going to be a driving instructor, because he's such a good with people, because he'd been in SWAT and he knew how to train at SWAT. And so he came back. And what was nice is that there was a time when some stuff happened and we ended up losing PVOC. It went away. They got a canned presentation. And Chief Shaw, who had been one of my driving instructors, brought me and Joey in and said, let's get back to what we used to teach.
When was this that they lost PVOC?
It was, I can't remember the year, but
I remember the incident. There was a kind of a wild incident that happened, and there was an audit done, and
Manny Sanchez is running the program right now, and he did a great job with it. But something happened, and there was some disconnect there, and T. Cole came in and said, "Wait a minute, that's not right," and so they had to get rid of PVOC. We brought it back, but it's called EVOC, Emergency Vehicle Operations, so it's not the same course, and we changed the grading, but it's the same course.
Totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, totally different because we changed the name and we changed the grading criteria because we only actually grade you on emergency response and the cumulative skills test now. But it's still the same program and it's really, really good. But that cumulative skills test, when you had to back out, remember you're in the 7-Eleven, you had to run across the parking lot, jump in your car, back through a bunch of stuff. Yeah. And then the chase is on. It was really fun.
Joey Fox, I know Misty was close to him, and you as well, and then Keith.
Yep.
Can you talk about him and his passing and that impact?
Yeah. One of the things I will say is that, Joey and I have been working very close together, at least a couple times a week. I had my other job, but we would meet after hours. We meet because Joey was all about training. He wanted to create the best police officer that you had inside of you. He was going to draw it out of you, right? Because he was a defensive tactics guy, and he'd been a sergeant in patrol, so he knew what I need you to be in order for you to be safe and stuff out there. And Joey and I were meeting a lot. And a matter of fact, I talked to him that day because he was right. We were almost finished with the program, and he was just revamping the legal part of it. And I was like, you do that because you're the lawyer. So, but he did, and we were going to meet that night. I was calling him that night to finish it up so we could take it to Chief Shaw to get it blessed off. And he went home, and he was a specimen of a man. He was physically fit. I don't know how old he was, but he was past,
he looked younger than he
was past 50.
Yeah, no, he looked like a consummate professional, just squared away, in shape.
Yeah. I will say that he and Bobby Parrott defy what aging is because they're both specimens of human beings, and they work out like nothing I've ever seen. But what happened was I got the call from Keith that he had passed away. He went home. He went and ran bleachers, something that Kevin never does. He went and ran bleachers over close to his house, came back.
I just recently met with Joey's wife, Mary.
Kind of heart attack.
And she gave me some cassette tapes and a bunch of photos from Joey's past.
It was.
I want the listener to hear Joey at work.
Hello.
Hello, this is Joey Fox, Dallas Police Department.
Yes.
Can I help you somehow?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, what can I do for you?
You can come get this guy to my house.
Okay. Are you Mr. Potter?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Tracy, right?
Tracy.
Tracy, where's this man at right now?
He's sitting right here. Got a gun on me.
He's got a gun on you. Are you free to talk, or is he listening, or?
He's listening, yes.
Okay. But does he want to talk to me, or?
I can't be having this stuff. I'm on heart medication.
Okay.
The doctor said don't have any kind of high anxiety situations.
Okay, how old are you, Tracy?
55.
55. Has this man told you his name, or
No.
anything like that?
No.
Has he hurt you in any way, or
No.
other than just threatening you with the gun?
Yeah, that he did.
Okay. Is there anybody else inside the house with you? I'm sorry?
No.
No?
I wish y'all could have this.
Okay, well, we're going to try. Is there any other phone in the house?
No, this is it.
That's the only phone. What room is that in?
It's in the living room.
It's in the living room. How long is the cord?
Oh, it's about 8 feet.
8
Kevin
feet?
never does. He went and ran bleachers over close to his house, came back, and he had what, I guess you call it the Widowmaker kind of
Heart attack.
And passed away. And that was devastating.
Shocking, really, too, for a lot of us.
It was. They named the track after him, which I still to this day. No, I'm just kidding. But the idea was they named the track after him because he did so much for everything that went on that track with RBT, with the defensive tactics and all the stuff. And man, he made people safer. He created a lot of good cops.
We'll do another letter here.
Oh,
this one should be a fun one for you.
okay.
A little background. Kevin and I became friends from PVOC in about the year 2000. I didn't become his sergeant until 2009. In the interview with 3 female lieutenants that knew we were close friends, they asked how would I manage friendship and subordinate relationships. My reply was meant to be humorous, so I replied, my goal as his sergeant will be to develop his skills to be half as good as he thinks he is.
I can already know who that is now.
Of course, they didn't think it would be possible, but they said it was worth a try. I was fortunate to have Kevin, Woody Leal, Derek Allen, and eventually Daryl Coslin as in-service instructors, along with what we titled the 3G Network, Lieutenant Garza, Chief Gasaway, and Chief Danny Garcia. They wholeheartedly allowed us to focus in-service training on officer safety type training. I believe Kevin and the others had good supervisors before me, but with the 3G, we were able to do some great training. Kevin is a workaholic and 100% devoted to officer training. His creative gene sometimes gets in the way of having his presentations ready in a timely manner before the day of the presentation. Unfortunately, I have some of that gene also, and on one occasion, we were giving a presentation at FLETC, and Kevin said he wanted to do the PowerPoint. I was teaching somewhere in the country and met him in Georgia, and we headed to a dinner with the FLETC chief over driver training and a chief from Las Vegas. What I wasn't aware of was this presentation was a big deal, and Kevin hadn't finished the PowerPoint. After dinner, knowing we would be up until the early morning getting ready, I unloaded on my favorite subordinate in the parking lot. I'll simply admit, the words I used were not very Christian-like.
No, they weren't.
Sadly, they didn't have any effect on his future behavior issues, but at least I felt better. By the way, in true Kevin fashion, we nailed the presentation to the point. The assistant director summoned us to her office, Connie Patrick, to personally tell us how well we did and that FLETC was changing the way they taught EVOC in the future. He's still a procrastinator. One day we were leaving headquarters, and he asked where we were going to eat lunch. I simply replied, "It's just lunch." I was quickly schooled about Kevin's priorities. Number 1, God and family. Number 2, work. Number 3, it's never just lunch. Meals are very important. One last thing. Kevin was a big shot with GM, and they relied on Kevin to provide driving experts at the Texas Motor Speedway to drive fleet managers in the new SUVs when they were first introduced to law enforcement. While all his hand-picked drivers did a fantastic job demonstrating the effectiveness of the new vehicles, one driver decided he would test the cornering limits of the vehicle. Well, in doing so, he and Paul Hinton, no one died, hit the wall and totaled one of their new demo vehicles. Fortunately, very few saw the crash and were unaware that they were top-heavy at high speeds. GM quickly removed the vehicle and acted like it was no big deal to destroy a $50,000 vehicle. I will quote Kevin as he explained to his trusted and talented PVOC drivers his exact words as the wrecker was turning the vehicle right side. "I wish that had happened to one of you and not me." Of course, we were just the subordinates that day. As you can tell, I always answer the phone when Kevin calls. "What's up, subordinate?"
It's true.
I hope this helps. He definitely has contributed a significant amount to the training and success of officers throughout his career. If there was a trainer in the Hall of Fame, he'd probably be the Pete Rose of law enforcement. Just kidding. Keith Wenzel.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Keith and I we have quite a bit of stories together. We traveled a lot together, and he was a great supervisor for me to have. I brought him over as a driving instructor, and he took over Reardon's defensive driving class, and anybody who's been to it knows that's the best defensive driving class. And Reardon did a great job. Mike Reardon did a great job, but Keith Wenzel was the best driving instructor, defensive driving instructor I've ever heard.
That was a fun time.
Yeah.
It was 2009 to 2012 for us. Joe and I were helping you with RBT programs. So it was like every Wednesday we'd be out there all day for that block of RBT, acting, instructing, and you and Keith were the duo there running all that. It was a good time.
Yeah, and Derek Allen was involved with that. Can you talk about reality-based training?
Yeah.
And and Danny and I, that's kind of really when I first met Danny. We were both doing the acting for the RBT.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him.
Well, listen, I really gravitated to the working cops. I mean, majority of the people that was in my programs were good cops. And if you weren't a good cop, I didn't need you, right? I just didn't need you in the program.
Well, I think we kind of take the same approach with this wellness unit. Is you want people that could be the messenger, and if you got somebody that doesn't have a good reputation as being a cop's cop or not a hard worker, you don't want to have them in front of people and conveying a message, especially for RBT.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Pat Starr out there. It was Pat and I helped in the surveillance school as well as the RBT.
Yep.
And Danny was an amazing actor for these scenarios.
Shooter.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I was
He always
wanted to be
was
the
the
bad
bad guy.
guy.
Well, I know that the guys that, first off, I needed people because you're teaching in service and they'd never seen RBT before. So the SWAT guys and the narcotics guy has, none of them have ever done that before. I remember when I came up that we need to do this. We absolutely need to
How
do
did that go?
Well, I will tell you, there was a lieutenant at the time that all he could tell me was, you can't do it within service. You can't do it within service. And I love that lieutenant. He's an outstanding boss, but you can't do it. He says, Kevin, if you try to do that, you're going to get somebody killed, because it had happened in Arlington and it happened other places. Yeah. And I went, well, if SWAT can do it and narcotics can do it, I know that I can train it to the point nobody's going to get hurt, right? And so, but they told me, so they gave me zero help. Okay, so I actually got to talking to Jerry Rhodes. Some of y'all know Jerry Rhodes, and he knew the Caruth family, Bill and Winnie.
Minnie, yep.
Minnie, yeah, Bill and Minnie. Wonderful family. And so what they did, he got me an audience with them, and I was telling them what I wanted to do. And I knew they had done so much for law enforcement already. And they, matter of fact, I think they had just finished doing something for the mounted unit and kind of got all their stuff set up. And so he came in, and Mr. Caruth said, well, can you run me through some scenarios? Okay, we'll write them up. So we wrote some scenarios up and we ran them through him. And he did an outstanding job. He reacted exactly the way he needed to in each scenario. He says, I see the value. And he wrote us a check. That check covered every gun we bought, all the equipment. It bought us a couple of different safes. And then he bought us 2 years worth of a whole core cycle worth of ammunition. And we started right after that. And it was pretty incredible to run every officer on the police department had to go through that through that RBT class in a training cycle.
We had the equipment, but backing up a little bit, how did you get the credentials, so to speak? So did you actually go out and study with Ken Murray?
Yeah, I did two schools. I did the Seminitions, their version of the school, and I went to the Ken Murray, I always call it coffee talk school, because he always wants to have those coffee talks at the end of the day. But I went to both of those schools. I mean, I knew that I had to if I was going to do this, and so we did that. And it took us a little while to get the equipment and stuff and everything. But I went to both of those schools immediately. I think I did one of them during the SWAT conference down there in San Marcos.
Yeah, probably with Ken Murray.
Yeah.
The first time I was exposed to the simunition rounds and that kind of hands-on training was with SWAT. They had it was at a school nearby. The
active shooter or something.
It was an active rapid rescue response. And
taught by SWAT.
It was taught by SWAT. Claggett was involved in that, and I remember taught the diamond formation, going in the hallways and clearing it, and that was the first time they had a fire alarm going off. They had blue smoke from a fire extinguisher in the hallway. It was this real life, it's reality based training, and that's
real life stressors.
Yes, as opposed to just the step 1, step 2 with no outside distractions or stress put on you. Whenever you pitched that, you said you didn't have a lot of help.
I didn't.
When did it finally get traction? After the Caruth wrote the check?
No, it got traction with Gil Garza and that 3G network.
Okay.
And they said, because what I had to take that basic lieutenant and say no, and there was a basic sergeant in there tell me no, and they'd both done it for many years. So there was valid concerns, and I get it, but I said no, I know we can do it. So the first thing I did was I went to those 2 schools, but before that I even went and got the right people to help me, and I brought in Sergeant Walt Mobley, one of my dear friends, who I knew had done this in SWAT and stuff like that, and I brought in my classmate. His name is Jack Googe, and Jack Googe had done it. He'd been in that before with I don't know if Jack was in. I don't think he was in SWAT, but he was in narcotics. Yeah. And so those 2 guys, and then also Jim Decker was a part of that as well. And so we got it started, and we brought in a bunch of good cops like you guys to come in and be my bad guys. I did make one mistake, and I'm going to tell the story, and he may not like it. I made one mistake. I brought a guy by the name of Jeremy Foy. It's one of my bad guys.
Yeah, we kind of know him.
Yeah, and I'll never forget. I taught everybody how to do it, and then I just sit back and made sure it was all running and making sure that not every scenario was a shoot, right? Because that's important. So I remember said, you know what? I haven't run one in a long time. Let me run one. So I'm running it, and Jeremy Foy, who is not a sergeant even yet, right? He was the bad guy, and for the first time in all the times we've been doing this, I caught a round right here on my neck, and Foy shot it. And he tells me still to this day, that was just an accident, but I know better. Because you know this, as the bad guy, you get so good at hitting what you're shooting at.
It's incredible. So as far as like my own shooting, and you talk about like instinctive shooting, every Wednesday I would pick a different way I was going to practice shooting as a bad guy. So one day I go in and I'm like, I'm going to shoot everything one-handed with my left hand. Yeah. Or then the next day it'd be, I'm only going to shoot everything from the hip.
Yeah.
And you do that every Wednesday for 2-3 years, and you really just start understanding the gun.
It was amazing. Yeah. I'll never forget Brittany Pilchek. Y'all probably remember her. I think she's gone now.
She is real estate now.
But she was always the bad guy. And I saw her one time shoot an officer right in the head, and she was in the crack of the door, and she was kind of far, and she shot it right through the crack of the door. I went, wow. But she said, Kevin, we get really good when we're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Well, bringing up Foy, I went through the week-long instructor school to become one of the instructors, me and Pat Starr, and I remember Kevin Campbell was in that class as well, and that was a lot of fun because as it expanded, you needed more instructors.
I did,
because you didn't have, and we people volunteering for actors. A lot of people would want to get out of a break from patrol, and it's fun. Yeah. You're getting to be a part of something, and as it grew, but I remember going through putting people through scenarios, and it was always the bar scene. Whenever the robbery bar scene, when two people would come in, and it was always Darren Loeria and Jeremy Foy would come in, and they were very colorful and
Foy,
intense. And I remember being in there when two female chiefs at the time. He came in, and I'm not going to say what he said because I don't want to put the explicit tag on this, but he came in and
he held that place up.
He held that place up while they were enjoying a 50, their lunch, and he had them down on the floor, and he was talking to them like you would imagine a movie bad guy talking to the complainants. And I think y'all pulled him to the side after that and had to tell him calm down.
Yeah, bring it down a notch.
Yeah. Talk about. I know the story, and I don't want to dime anybody out, but whenever you introduce the video and the cameras, can you talk about that?
Yeah, one of the things that we did was when we started this, we had good instructors. We really did. Joe, you were one of our main instructors for a long time, and one of the things that we did is I was watching some of the scenarios, and you guys in SWAT probably understand this better than no one ever told me this, but what I found was what was happening that I saw and what the instructor was saying happened were not the same. I mean, I remember instructor one time, we were on that back road back there where we used to run, and we were in the academy back on Redbird Lane, and the instructor said, well, you didn't ever break leather until this. I said, that's not true. He came out pretty quick with his gun. And so I went to the people that I had to answer to, and I said, I want to buy video cameras, and I want everything to be videoed. And I wrote a policy. We're going to destroy it right after, okay? But we're going to have a video, and I want the instructor to mainly guide the things, and then when they go into the classroom or a private room, sit down and watch their own thing, and you're just there to guide them. Because one of the things I learned really quickly is cops will never believe what you tell them, okay? You didn't break leather, or you did this, or you did that. And they'll go, no, that didn't happen. Because in their mind, it didn't happen. And then when they watched themselves, the learning that went on, because they were actually seeing, and nobody was just saying it, in their mind, they said that didn't happen. And that really changed how good we got.
Well, it made them better as well too, because they saw mistakes and yeah, you had you have a little room off to the side, and there was like 5 laptops set up, and we would plug in the camera, and we would run them through the scenarios, and people were shocked at watching themselves.
Yeah, they were.
And they learned from that.
They learned. I think Palmer said the same thing when the cameras came in the interrogation room.
Game changer.
You get better because you're watching yourself going, I didn't really say that, did I? And you just get better and better and better. So,
Did you ever keep a video?
There's a chief that will be retiring in the not too distant future, I'm sure, that I have his video.
He's got to be close.
He's got to be close. But I love him. I love him. Matter of fact, he was my chief at one time. I think it was during the surveillance. He told me it was Chief Rick Watson, who I know very well. I rodeoed with him way back in the day. Outstanding guy. I loved him to death. And but I have a video of his that maybe his retirement party. That video.
Oh man, I gotta go to that.
But I'll tell you this. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, and he was very good at it. And I'll tell you what scenario it was is when you were out running.
And the phone's on one side and the gun's on the other side of the room. Yeah.
Because that's a real thing that happened to Gary Kirkpatrick, my sergeant. He brought it to me, and that was before cell phones, so it was the wall phone was over here and this gun's over there.
You come back from your run into the house and someone's
your
broken
personal
in.
home. Yeah,
there's burglars in there. Yep. So we created that, and it was a really cool deal.
You know, okay, I'm not going to say who because that person's a commander now, but they went through that same scenario, and I was told by you to watch this person because they're high strung. They how the scenario goes.
I know who you're talking about.
There's a closed off back bedroom. And basically, okay, you just got in from a run, you're hot and sweaty, your gun's over here, your cell phone's over here. You see people hop your fence and they're running to the back door. Okay, we're hot. All of a sudden, the back door boots open. They boot the back door open. 2 bad guys come in. They're full geared up in their protective gear, and they start rummaging through your room. What we would usually like to see is you run to get your gun, hold them at gunpoint outside the doorway, get them on their hands at position of disadvantage and draw, get them to crawl out to you. Then that way you can get your phone and call 911. Mm-hmm. I've had some people just run out the back door. Okay, go to the neighbor's house and call 911. Well, this one person that you warned me about gets them to crawl to his voice. Everything looks good. And as they got to his feet, he shoots them both at his feet. And mind you, there are other officers, and shoots them in the head. And I hey, index. And he's like, F that. You come in my house, you're dead. I hunt and harvest means kill. And I was terrified to go to the other scenarios. But
I did warn you.
You warned me, Derek.
We saw a lot of stuff.
It was astonishing.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how long a person had been on.
Yeah.
Rank didn't matter. It was. You had that kind of
you really
reality.
Got some insight into some people's minds here who are on the department.
Yeah. Well, it made a lot of people become self-aware too.
Yeah,
it made a lot of people go, "Damn, I got to be better.
Yeah.
I got to be quicker. I got to process things faster. I need to make better decisions."
Yeah,
it made better cops.
It's all about that stress inoculation you're giving them. Just like putting a helmet on, sometimes people will do that, and then you're getting into that deal, and you're like, and I promise you, cops came out of that, especially in the video days, and said, I need to work on this. I need to work on that.
Or just even some formatting or template ideas on this is the kind of scenario. There's so many variables, right? But just some of that being taken away where there was no formal training on some of this stuff and these scenarios. But you put an officer in this generic scenario and then you change the variables. But some of that brain power is given up to where it doesn't have to focus so much on this is something very new. I've never experienced it before. Yeah. Now we can start making decisions on the finer details and the variables, but overall I have a general idea on how I should handle myself in this.
Yeah, I'll never forget how everybody looked like to me sideways whenever I made a decision where we're going to do something. And they go, you got to be kidding me. And what I did was, remember when you go in the restaurant, and I would ask you, or somebody would ask you, your instructor, y'all would ask them, do you carry your gun with you on your person when you go into a restaurant off duty? And a lot of people said no. I said,
take it away.
Get your butt in there right without no gun. So I want you to see there's a reason why in the general orders it says we carry our guns in the city of Dallas, right? And you get that pretty quick. Or if you said I keep it in my wife's purse or whatever, then we put it in your wife's purse. And now you got to scramble for what, and it made officers think, wow, maybe that's not the best way to do that.
When Jeremy Forey busted in the back door, holding you at gunpoint, and you saw tables turning over and
People crawling under tables.
Oh, it was wild. It was wild.
Absolutely.
Still to this day, though, I just went through our active shooter training with the RBT and the sim rounds, and it's it was now the people that are on the department now, and then the rookies come in, they go through it, they have no idea. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
They never saw how it was before that.
Yeah.
And that was a game changer. Bringing RBT to DPD was a game changer.
Yeah, to where that standard has been elevated. Yeah. So it was a culture change. Yeah. Really, with you bringing on RBT, and that we are now seeing the change of that culture to where it is not something that's new and fresh and abnormal. Instead, it's just boring and the standard.
Yeah, it was good stuff, and it's still good stuff today. And I was very proud of the fact that I was able to bring that to every single police officer that comes here. But I will tell you, I had a great crew that all I had to do, I was a puppet master. I just said, you're doing that, and I just got back.
Yeah. That's all.
Yeah, because I can talk.
Reasonable alternatives. Yeah. Talk about that and what that was for DPD.
I will tell you that was one of all the classes I created, it was the one that was just a lecture that I was the most proud of because I'll tell you how it started. Katrina Shedd had gone she was my lieutenant at the time, and she had gone to a conference, and a guy was teaching a class called Managing Officer-Created Jeopardy. Pretty interesting class. And trust me, everybody in this room has created your own Jeopardy at some point in time in your career.
Oh, yeah.
Not you, Overton. I wasn't talking about you, Sarge. But we've done it, right? And it was a great class. It was 4 hours long. It was about one incident. And it was taught by a friend of mine and put together by a friend of mine by the name of Gary Taylor, who is a Savannah police officer. And there they have it's a county kind of task force kind of metro area. But Gary, one of the best teachers I've ever seen, really, really good. And he was a driving instructor as well. So he and I had already been down the path together, and nothing but the utmost respect for him. But he was teaching that class. And so Katrina went up afterwards and said, hey, Chief Shedd went up and talked to him afterwards and said, hey, I kind of like this class. I'd like to send one of my guys from Dallas here to hear you. He goes, how about sending Kevin Navarro? She goes, you know Kevin Navarro? I said, yeah, we're like best buddies. He comes here and helps me all the time, and I help him all the time, and we talk all the time. She goes, oh, yeah, I'll send him. So she came back to go see this class, and I did. And then when I came back, what I learned was I needed this to be more than just one incident, right? Because officers are going through several different things. So I sit down and I created violent encounters, things when things go bad. Then I cop versus car, because we jump in front of a lot of cars, and there's no reason for that. Felony stops, because after the Mark Nix shooting, we needed to change the way we were doing that, right? And then, of course, Code 3 driving was a big part of it, which, I was able to lean on Keith Wenzel because he had, Keith's researches that stuff like nobody else. And the last one was police misconduct. And I'll never forget, there was a young kid that got shot up in Northeast. He lived, and he's still, I think, still an officer today. But I was on Facebook, and I saw officers saying, we got to catch that guy, we got to shoot that guy, I say, don't put that stuff on Facebook. I mean, because that might actually happen, and I don't want everybody to think we're set to do it that way, right? Because that's not what no officer's ever out to hurt anybody. We'll defend ourselves, but we're not out there to hurt somebody. We want to bring them to justice, absolutely. But that's all we want to do. And so I had that whole misconduct thing. We had a rash of about 8 DWIs in 1 year. That was a big part of it. So that was what that was about. But it was one of the best classes that I created that I felt like somebody might get something really out of this. The interrogation class that I created was outstanding. It was off the chain good, but this touches every single person. When you look at the kid that got hit on the bike, the 10-year-old boy that got hit on the bike, his name was Cole, and I think we always need to remember that young man's name. The officer that drove that car that did that was every single one of us, because running call to call to call in Southeast, in that part of Southeast, and the lights not being on, and you're going 70 in a 40 because it's 2-lane divided, and you're feeling very comfortable with that. There's not a cop that I know, or I didn't know, I don't know the new ones right now, but that would never have done that. And that was a freak accident that happened to that officer. But when you watch that one video, it'll change the way you drive.
Well, and his reaction.
Yeah.
His reaction.
Yeah, his genuine reaction.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to talk to he's a sergeant now in the police department.
He's my wife's sergeant.
Really? Great guy. And he went through a tremendously bad time because of that. And there wasn't a wellness unit back in those days.
No.
You might talk to some at Via or Conaway or something at that time, but it's not the same, right? And I applaud him for being able to get through that. But I remember a good friend of mine teaches that class too. His name is Travis Yates. He's a doctor now, so I say Dr. Travis Yates. But he's a Tulsa major or captain, and a good friend of mine and Keith Wenzel's. And he was teaching that class one day, because one thing that Keith and I did is we always gave all of our stuff away. If we create something that's a pretty good video that might help an officer, we believe in giving it away. But only thing I ever ask is that you listen to me teach it one time so you understand the story, because I don't want you to bring in your own narrative to it, right? So we did. And I was watching him teach that class, and he was watching the video. And I said, you've watched that video so many times. Watch the audience, because it is the most impactful video I've ever shown in a classroom. And I was teaching all over the country, that you will see a reaction more in that video than any other, because every single officer can put themselves in that shoe.
And this is the video from the in-car dash camera of the police officer.
Absolutely.
We're getting that all captured
Absolutely.
on camera.
And the devastation that you see in him when he realizes he hit that little kid and shot him across the deal, and he's dead. And it's powerful, and you might slow down every now and then when you do that.
I looked at PVOC and RBT as they're very important, but they were like hard skills.
Yep.
And something you get in the academy, and maybe something you have in continued training. When you did the reasonable alternatives, I really felt that was targeting this darker corner of problems we had on the police department, where we needed to address these things and bring them out, and let's get better at this. We already know that we need to shoot better.
Yep.
We already know we need officer safety, and we need to drive the car better and everything else. But this really was something where you're kind of dredging up things from the bottom that are real problems. Yep. That they're not in a police curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll remember, and I won't say names or nothing, but I remember when Mark Nix was killed. Tragic deal. They were chasing what they believed was a murder suspect in a car that was used in a murder like 2 days before or a day before. And I remember people saying on the radio, don't run up on the car, don't run up on the car. And I'm going to give Mark the benefit of the doubt, because he may not have run up on the car had it stayed in a traffic kind of stop. But the car wrecked out and was faced bumper to bumper with him. And so he made the decision to go forward. And Jason Jark, oh my God, what an outstanding human being he is. But he ran up there and all that fire going on, guys were laying out expression. But Mark Nix ran up to the car and was shot by the only shot that gun was allowed to shoot, because it jammed. And he got shot, and it hit his badge, and it hit his carotid artery, and he passed because of that. And one of the things I remember telling people, I got to have that video, and this is what we're going to do with it. We're going to take it to the police headquarters building. We're going to say every sector has to send one person around the clock to come see that video, because when you see that video, you may not run up on a car again. 6 months later, a man who had killed his 2 stepsons, his wife, and raped his 2...
Robert Sparks.
Yeah, Robert Sparks. I interviewed him on death row, by the way. Very interesting. But the idea of it is, he gets in a chase. A young officer by the name of Chris Wood, great guy, was behind him, and he shoots at Chris. So now we have this thing going on. And I use that, and this is just 6 months after Nix has been killed, running up on a car, and the chase is going on. And I remember V. Lee. Oh, love V. Lee, great supervisor. and we'll just leave it at that. But the idea of it is great operator. But V. Lee is on because SWAT is in the chase, and he's saying, "Don't run up on the car. Don't run up on the car. Don't run up on the car." And what happens is he goes into a cul-de-sac, and they said
Monday Circle.
he's going into the cul-de-sac, so this is going to end right here. Everybody knew it. Don't run up the car was the last thing Vince Lee said over the radio. And then, of course, the car stopped. He was in a car that was a handicapped car for a handicapped driver. Yeah.
A van, yeah.
Yeah. And so, the van, sorry. And he's maneuvering in that deal, and it was not real smooth because it was very hard for him to drive that. And then all of a sudden, all these officers, and I'm telling you, great police officers were running up on that car. And some were fighting on this side. Somebody put a rifle through on the other side, and it was just havoc, right? But he'd already thrown the gun out the window. But we don't know he's got a second gun, right? But still. So that happens. I think if we'd shown that video, it wouldn't have happened that way. I think somebody would have adhered to don't run up on the car. So I end up going, as part of my thing, going into prisons for this other thing. I went and interviewed Robert Sparks. And I asked him several questions. But the one I think is important to us is that, so tell me a little bit about how that ended. He goes, let me tell you something. I wished I had not run out of bullets and thrown that gun out the car because I had no idea they were going to give me an opportunity to kill as many of them as I could. And he said, I would have had I had a gun. He says, because I never thought they were going to rush up on me. I thought they were going to do the deal, pro me out, do that stuff. And he told me that from death row. It was pretty powerful. And so I said, and I fought a little longer, and we got the video, and we started showing it. And from what I was told by FTOs and supervisors and patrols, said we're seeing a lot more felony traffic stops now. And again, to me, that's what my job is. And I know it's Monday morning quarterbacking, but as I always started that class out with, is if something ever happens to me and somebody here can teach so that nobody else does what I did that got myself killed or injured, please do it. Absolutely do it. And I think most officers would agree with that.
I think anybody can learn from it. Look at what pro athletes do.
Yeah.
They watch game tape.
Yeah.
They watch the film and they'll learn from the mistakes.
Yep.
Dallas Streets. That was another a class that you developed, and I had the honor of being one of the instructors for that. Can you tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, Dallas Streets was Wenzel and I used to sit in he would come in my office a lot because I was the subordinate. But the idea is he'd come in my office and said, okay, we need something new because patrol's not getting enough. If nobody knows anything about Keith Wenzel, this is the only thing you really need to know. He loved patrol people. Everything he wanted to do was about patrol. He didn't care about detectives. He didn't care about SWAT because SWAT got their own, narcotics, patrol. So he came up with this idea about Dallas Streets. So he and I got together and we started putting it together because he knew that I had a knack for getting good people like you and others that were there, Reed Dilbeck and all those guys that came in. I think Foy was a part of that as well. And so I wrote the scenarios. We got the helicopter involved. And we have the 3G network. That 3G network said, sure, go get that. Do it. Absolutely. So we're going to train on the shift that you actually work because it's nothing like coming from the late night shift to days, and now the environment's completely different and all that. And we had the Dallas Naval Air Station.
Yeah, the Hensley Field.
Yeah, it was awesome. So we started that class there, and we brought in great actors and great instructors like you, Daryl Coslin, Woody Lill. I love Woody Lill. I mean, he was a great instructor. And Derek Allen, Daryl Coslin, they were all part of that. But they were there to manage, to make sure that the instructors were doing the right things. And we had a good program.
Yeah, it incorporated vehicle pursuits with RBT.
Yep.
And the scenarios are set up. You're going to be in a car chase.
Yep.
And it may or may not end in a deadly force encounter when they get out of that vehicle. So,
and what we did was, in order to make it the safest we could, all the officers wore glasses and all the bad guys had blanks so that there was nothing coming back at them, but they were geared up. The actors were geared up so that you might shoot them. So it was really good training. And
I was so well received too by patrol. And I'm glad you pointed out that a lot of the training was geared towards patrol, because that is 60% of our department, and they don't get that type of training usually.
Yeah, the specialized units get training for their job, but these patrol guys, they're usually too busy too. I think adjusting that training to be during their work hours was very beneficial for them.
Yeah, I mean, Wendell had always had two things he always told me. We should train during our work hours, and I got to give it to Woody and Derek Allen, and even Delia Rodriguez was part of that. They did not mind adjusting their hours to work on the hours that the people were working. So that was great, right? And then it's that, and the other thing he's always said, no chief's ever been able to do it, but he said it's wrong that I work in patrol as a supervisor, and I see some of my guys one day a week. He says, if I was the boss, I would make every patrol sector or whatever work the same days off as their sergeant, and the other group works that days off, and they work that days off, and that's how I would run everything. I said, that's actually pretty brilliant, actually.
Kevin, we talked about all these new trainings that you had for patrol. They were really specialized training that prior to you coming up with these new training, Dallas Streets and RBT, it was usually just for narcotics, SWAT, and in any kind of specialized unit, TFOs. Surveillance school is another one that you developed and you pushed out there, that people in patrol got to get a taste of that kind of training.
Yeah, the idea of it is, I believe it was Chief Garcia. No, it was actually Chief Watson came to me and said, "Hey, Kevin, we're having all these chases that are having to get called off, so we can't do anything with that." And they were talking about creating something that was later deemed as tactical surveillance. Okay,
Tactical apprehension.
Tactical apprehension. You got it. Sorry, you're right. Tactical apprehension. Tactical apprehension. But he says we need to teach our people how to do surveillance, because people don't know how to do it. And narcotics has it; they do it, but they kind of teach each other. Within, it's kind of like a SWAT deal. We teach within, and so. Do you have any way of creating something like that for us that we can teach all the deployment units and then patrol to support the deployment units? I said, well, just so happens there's a guy that I know at the FBI Academy who is over one of the main instructors in the PVOC or EVOC, TVOC, what they call it. And he's a good friend of mine, and he started his career with the FBI as a surveillance person in New York City. So I'll give him a call and see what we can come up with. So I called my good friend Lee Wetzel. I mean, a tremendous guy that has helped me so much through my career. As a matter of fact, I just saw him a couple weeks ago, and he's doing very well, retired, but playing lots of golf. But he said, I told him what I needed. He says, we can make that happen. You come up here, it won't cost you a dime. You just got to get here. And I'll put you up, and we'll lodge you, not a problem. And y'all come up here, bring about 4 or 5 people, and I'm going to bring in a team that's going to teach this for you. Outstanding. So I go to my bosses. It's only going to cost us airfare, and they'll pick us up. We'll go to the academy, and we'll do it from there. And they're going to use their cars, all that stuff. So we did. It was who went with me was first person I picked was Walt Mobley, because I know him very well, and I know he'll help me develop it. Matt Kalinek, some of y'all remember him. He was he was in a deployment unit, so he was good for me to pick.
So this was probably 2008, 2007?
Yes, maybe about that time.
Because this is before Matt Kalinek left DPD and went to the Marshals.
It was before he saw the bigger, greener pastures, and he came back.
And he came back and he ended up being on SWAT with me.
Yeah. I think he have to go all the way back to the academy.
Yes.
Yeah,
this is all sidebar stuff, but SWAT was teaching active shooter.
Yeah.
And he all of a sudden was in one of the scenarios.
Yeah.
What are you doing, man?
What are you doing?
Came back to DPD. I'm going through the academy again. Yeah.
Yeah. So the chief asked me to do that, and we worked it out, and we went up there. When we got up there, I didn't know this at the time, but the people that were teaching us was it was all being directed by Lee Wetzel, were the people that followed the FBI agent I think
Robert Hansen.
Robert Hansen. They wrote a movie called Breach about him.
Yep.
He was selling stuff to the
It was
Russians.
it was the largest data breach in U.S. history, and he was selling it to the Russians. And they in the movie, Ryan Felipe plays the agent that went undercover and got in with him. And
that group had followed the FBI agent Hansen around for 2 years in that process. That was the people that taught my class, and they were amazing. And I will tell you, they weren't all. They were most of them were. I'll get it wrong, but probably SOGs, but they weren't sworn. They were working for the FBI in that capacity. And what was great about it was because they weren't, quote, law enforcement, they blended in with everything. So we ran a scenario. We had about a 2 or 3 hour classroom, and we knew that our days were going to be like 12-hour days. We went from there into a couple of different scenarios, trying to understand takeaways and those kinds of things. And then the next day, it was we started at, I think, noon, and we finished at midnight on one scenario. And it was, I tell you, it was with me, Joe Garza was there, and there was a couple other people, Jim Decker, but there was 6 of us total. And I remember at one time in rush hour traffic in Arlington, Virginia, I got stuck as the eye, and I was there for an hour all by myself in the rush hour traffic. That is not fun to do. And but it was good for me to beat that, so I can help, as other people are doing this. Why? Sometimes you just have to bumper lock them and just do it. We were actually, because they got good actors at the FBI, we were actually following guys who were going to do they were going to blow up a mosque. It was really a pretty cool thing. And they had cameras in this van that they had that the bad guys ran, and they were filming us doing what we were doing. So it was really cool training. And, of course, I immediately said, well, we can't do that. We don't have that money. But the scenario was good. So the third day was more about us learning how to teach it. So we ran another scenario, and I went with Lee Wetzel. And he says, Kevin, this is what you have to do here. This is what you got to avoid. And he taught me in that, 6-hour scenario, everything I needed to know to be able to come back here and create what we have. And so we did. We came back here and created it. Were you ever an actor in that?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Pat Starr and I were some actors in that.
Y'all were early on.
Yeah, we were way early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an outstanding school.
Yeah. I take a lot of pride in that one because first off, it's fun as all get out.
Sure is.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half in the classroom, and the rest day and a half are
All around Dallas.
just going.
All over scenario, all day long scenario.
Yeah.
You put us through. It was somebody. I know that feds were involved. They came in, and it was a 2-day scenario. The entire thing it involved the Dart Rail station.
Oh, yeah.
And remember that? And we started at Hooters in West End, and then went through Dart Rail, and it was
The only thing I will say is if you're going through it, the cheat code for it was if somehow someone Kevin Navarro knows just randomly popped up in this side of the city, you knew they were part of the school, the surveillance scenario.
we had Top Golf incorporated in that.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
great.
in the
I remember seeing Roger Martin just appear out of nowhere one time, and I'm like, son of a...
Well, what was interesting is that, one of the things they did to us is that in that big, long scenario, they all went to eat, but we weren't allowed to go eat.
Yeah.
But what it taught us was if you got a team together, you got to figure out who's going to go to Chick-fil-A and get stuff and bring it back to all of us without being seen that you're handing everybody food.
Or how do you just even, trading off to run to the bathroom?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
who knows how long they're going to take to eat, right?
Exactly.
2
Very
hours in the
similar to when
restaurant?
you was up there in at the school that day. I mean, it's like, how are we going to go to, all that stuff. It's all those things that nobody teaches you. So we were teaching it in that class. And so we used Topgolf, and in the winter, it was too cold, we would go to the bowling alley. And what was nice about both of those places was, because we had objectives in all of our classes, is that, my name was up there, that other person's name was there at Topgolf and at bowling. So you should take pictures of that. Hopefully somebody comes back in and they can take pictures of whenever Bill goes up to hit the golf ball, you're taking a picture of Bill, and Bill is that guy. So therefore we're starting to identify people, so there's lots of objectives that are being met throughout that.
I remember one of the scenarios at North Park Mall. North Park Mall was a big player in these. in all these scenarios, that we were following somebody, and you were one of the bad guy actors, and this is when I went through it. Y'all were doing a string of ATM robberies across Dallas.
Yep.
And you actually met with Wenzel at North Park Mall in the food court. I come up, and there was a female sitting by herself. I quickly badgered her and said, "Hey, I'm following these two guys over here. Can I sit here with you for a second?" I got closer, and I remember your eyes kept cutting up and looking at me, wondering what the hell I was doing. And y'all were drawing a map, and you left it on the table. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I came
Oh, yeah.
up and got it, and you were like, who did you sit with? I don't know. Probably to this day, she thought she was helping out on some
Major operation.
Yeah, major operation.
Yeah. No, but that was all. It was all about that. We always played with the credit card when we went to eat, in hopes that somebody
Receipts.
would get that receipt. Right? Yeah. It was all of that was part of what Lee Wetzel, the FBI agent that helped me, said. These are what's important, because you're just trying to build the case and be able to avert the crime. We had major ones like that one. We called it the Overhill Gang one time because it was me and Wenzel and a bunch of old guys. It's like the Overhill Gang's burglarizing.
I forgot about that.
Exactly.
Stupid.
But I remember that we always start. Maybe I shouldn't give the secrets away, but we always started that one of those at the Highland Park Village, because we had just finished doing the walk behind everybody at the mall, and we go over there, and I tell you, it was Felicia. I think it's Russell now.
Shipley at the time.
Shipley. Yeah. She was a great actor for us, and I know she's in Assaults now, and she's doing very good there. But she was great, and you would follow her because she was the girlfriend of somebody you think was involved in this, and she would go and get on the dart train, and it threw everybody out of whack.
Yeah.
Splitting up too. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And there was an art to putting them back on them whenever they lost them. You know how we did that. So yeah, but
we
no.
got lost so bad over and over again. Listen, there is a red Miata. He's turning right now in front of you. It went on for like 15 minutes. Whoever was supposed to be watching the Miata did not see it.
Yep.
It was so horrible.
Yeah, but what great training. And the idea of it is that when Walt Mobley and I kind of really started working this thing together, and we got to the point where we knew where everybody was going to screw up because they all did exactly the same thing. But the idea of it is that we're not trying to beat the person down, because I've seen some structures do that. I'm trying to build you up so that when a deployment unit really needs a patrol guy because somebody's off, they can just pull somebody and they have the confidence to be able to work in that capacity.
Because it is an art.
It is an art. It absolutely is an art. But no, the surveillance class was a lot of fun, and I was very thankful. I did do one bad thing to the FBI, because I went to the FBI many times in my career, and one time I was working at the AMC movie theater, and I got the Breach movie poster, and I put it in their Hogan's Alley in their theater.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, that was not a fun time for them.
Yeah, it was not. But
good movie, though.
But that's an amazing group of people that do that every day, and they're unsung heroes, the ones that actually do that job.
Yeah, like I said, it is an art, and they're going. There's teams right now going around following people to stop a bigger picture.
Yeah, they're following mafia people. They're following different country people. They're really
terrorists.
good at it. Yep, absolutely.
Speaking of art, the art of interrogation, a 360-degree perspective.
Yep.
I'm really excited to talk about this because I remember hearing about you doing this, and it's just a fascinating project.
Yeah, it was like the final thing that this is what I wanted to create all these years, and it was way bigger than I ever thought. That happened in 2010, and it's still being taught. Matter of fact, Robert Quirk is in Botswana teaching it today. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff, right? But one of the things I will say is, I tell you how it started. I had this idea, when I came back here, they sent me to read interrogation and all these things. And what I learned was none of these people did it the way I did it. Like the read program is, you got to do point 1, then you got to do point 2, and then it was like a 21-step program, and I didn't have time for 21 steps. It was about building rapport, getting somebody willing to talk to me, and then theming them out and doing it, right? And so I've been doing that. P.E. Jones taught that to me. Bobby Hammer taught that to me. So we were doing it. So I said, I want to create a class like that. So I was talking to my classmate, Scott Donovan. He was my classmate. He was here about 5 years, and he left and went to FLETC. And he was an instructor at first, and then he became a branch chief and a division chief. And now he is the director of the ILEA, the International Law Enforcement Training Center in Budapest, Hungary, which I was able to go and share this with him there and his team there. But I remember talking to him at our 25-year reunion and told him, hey, I'd kind of like to do this. So he calls me a few years later and says, hey, listen, I'm the chief now, and I can probably make this happen. Why don't you figure out how much it's going to cost and call me back. I think we can get this done. He said, but we're going to do something different. Because mine was just go talk to people that I'd put there, right, or that I knew. He goes, we're going to use first 48 cases or cases that have video of them. We'll do some of your guys too, but that's what we're going to do. And then we'll have the perspective from the detective we'll interview, and then we'll have the perspective of the bad guy, and then we'll actually have the actual video of the actual confession, which that wasn't there when I was there. So I thought, that's brilliant. FLETC made this little thing I had an idea about into something that's unbelievably good. So I called him back. I went and talked to a few people and stuff, and I did the city of Dallas math on this. We're going to drive my car, because I had a Lexus that I pulled out of the pound. So I said, can I get the pound puppy and like take it, because it didn't have very many miles on it, and I knew it'd make it. We're going to go to all these different prisons, and I figured it out. It's 7 different prisons, and they were all over the state of Texas. And then we're going to stay at the Motel 6. That's not expensive. Probably can get most of them to donate it to us if they know what they're doing. We'll brown bag it. We'll just do whatever. And then I called him and I said, it's probably going to cost like $5,000, because I was going to use a little camcorder. And $5,000, I was worried that it wasn't going to work. He calls me back the next day and he says, hey, I got approval to do it, and they told me that I have $250,000. And I said, well, we're going to stay and eat better than we were originally, but I love it. And so we started on the process. This was in like September's when we met with Waldrop and stuff, and he signed off on it of 2009, and then we started working on it. We filmed in June is when we filmed The Prisoners. Let me just tell you, June in Texas prisons is not very good, okay? Most of the prisons we had someplace was air conditioning, but it was pretty brutal in there. But we went the first time, I think, in February. We went to all these different places. We were talking to different people, see where you're interested. And I didn't lie. I was the same person I was when I was on homicide. I'm going to be honest with you all the way through, and you tell me if you want to work or not. And what I found was I was honing my skills of interrogation again, because now I'm trying to get this guy there's no reason for him to help me, and he's going to help me. And we ended up getting several people to agree to talk to us. 2 death row inmates, but neither one of them talked to us, because the week before we got there, one death row inmate had stabbed another death row inmate with a spear he made out of magazine pages, because he had told on them. It was interesting.
It's resourceful.
Yeah, what was interesting is that the warden told me we rushed him to the hospital, the death row inmate, to get him better so that we can execute him at a later date. But that was kind of interesting. But the idea is those 2 guys didn't come out and talk to us, and one of them was mine, so I was really wanting that to happen. And the other one was Robert Sparks. He agreed to talk to us, and now he's not going to. But he did talk to us once, but not on camera. So we get all that worked up, and then now we're going in with the film crew. And it was quite intensive group, and they had 2 big old dollies full of stuff, very professional. And we went in and we started taping on the very first one. I think we did 4 guys at the first prison we went to, and it was powerful stuff that was being told to us. The very first guy we did was a guy by the name of Michael Dale Smith. Michael Dale Smith was a person that was my case, and it was interesting because he was an older guy. He was 60 when I went in there to see him. He was involved in a murder in South Dallas, and at the Camp's food store on 4th Street. As y'all probably remember it. And but the idea of it was it was nice to talk to him first because he knew me. when I walked into the room, when he comes into the room that we're in, he said, "Hey, Kevin, good to see you." He came up and gave me a hug and all that stuff. And Scott Donovan, who was with me, who is federal agent, right? He was like, "This is kind of weird that he's hugging you and stuff." But the idea of it is we built such a relationship in that interrogation room. And then I testified against him in his trial that he had down in Anahuac, Texas. And so we had a good relationship. And my goal is always in interrogation that I want to continue to have that good relationship. I don't want you coming looking for me when you get out, to be honest with you. But it was really good. So that one went really well. I made a lot of mistakes. I was talking when he was talking. Well, that's, Danny, you know this very well. That's not good. And then my hand kept going in front of the camera, but I learned a lot there. And I have to give credit to the team that was there, but specifically one of the guys that I worked very much with all the way through this. His name is Ira Weiner. Ira Weiner was the video editing guy at FLETC, and he and I and a lady by the name of Jenny Groot, who was in the behavioral science division where Palmer was and Quirk is now, who was brilliant, and she wrote everything, made everything so simple for me. Without her, the program wouldn't be what it is today. But those two people and I worked hand in hand together, and they made me actually sound somewhat intelligent. They took all the ums and the ahs and all that stuff out of my videos and stuff, and it was good. And Scott Donovan was sitting side by side all the way through it with me. And I mean, Scott is he's unbelievably good at training and developing training. So that partnership was something that Dallas has benefited from because of how we did that.
When your mission to do this, and you had an idea of what you wanted it to be, it sounds like it was more than you set out.
Oh yeah, without question. I had no idea that it was going to go as well as it did, and that FLETC was going to spend the money they did to make sure we had great. We have over 800 video clips from the inmates and stuff, and then we have we've made 5 case studies, and we still use one of those today.
It's amazing.
And Eddie Ibarra was, I can tell you who the detectives were: Eddie Ibarra, John Palmer, John Davison, Dwayne Thompson, and Scott Sayers. That's the guys that I used on this.
That's a heavy lineup.
That's a heavy lineup. That's some guys that know what they're doing, very much so. And what was neat about it is, for Sayers, he was new. He was brand new in homicide. And there was a case that he was on that he made a couple of little mistakes that could have been a little bit detrimental. And one of the things he did, he says, "Kevin, I want you to share this. I want you to show that I did this a little wrong," because I had the girl that he interviewed. She goes, "I wouldn't have talked to him. I'd only talk to Penrod because of something that happened." And he was new, and he was still the great street cop that he was. And if y'all didn't know Sayers, he was an amazing street cop. But he was still in that mode, and he was working with Penrod, and Penrod was definitely not in that mode. And it came that Penrod left, Palmer left. Scott Sayers was the guy to go to up there when Palmer left, and he just retired recently, and he is an outstanding interrogator, and he's an outstanding detective.
We've got one last letter I want to read you.
Okay.
It says, "So I've known Kevin for more than 43 years, having met him at DPD at Police Academy in 1981. 81? I know we talked about it, but that seems like it's so long ago now.
It was.
Since that time, we've kept in touch. I left DPD for the Secret Service in 1983. After my retirement from the Secret Service in 2005, I took a job at FLETC, and Kevin and I got to work together again on an interviewing project jointly produced with DPD Homicide and Training and FLETC Behavioral Science, where I worked. The project was groundbreaking and continues to provide exceptional interview and interrogation training to law enforcement officers worldwide. As I write this, retired DPD Homicide Detective Robert Quirk, now with FLETC, is delivering advanced interviewing training at the International Law Enforcement Academy in Gaborone, Botswana. Kevin is a highly intuitive trainer, an accomplished interrogator, and is highly creative. Fun facts about Kevin: he cannot keep quiet, he cannot stay still, and he cannot sleep. For real. But that's because the wheels in his head are always turning. We had an incredible time together creating a program out of our project, and it really cemented our relationship. Now, Kevin will tell you that I talk more than him. Do not believe it. That's a physical impossibility. But seriously, it is part of the package with seasoned interrogators, and Kevin and I share the same curiosity about meeting new people and the ability to talk to and relate to anybody. Kevin is a dear friend and one of my true partners. As you know, that is the highest compliment we can give to each other, and I would go through any door with him. Scott Donovan.
Yeah, what a great guy. I mean, listen, I wouldn't be where I am today in that realm without Scott Donovan. And he was a great classmate back in the day. Somebody he had been in the military and stuff, so he was a guy that you followed in the classroom. Very, very good. And when he left, DPD lost, but Secret Service gained because he was a polygrapher for them. He spoke fluent Russian. We actually talked to one of the people on one of my cases on death row, and he had taught himself how to speak Russian. And so Scott talked to him, and it was really kind of an interesting moment to watch because that's the first time he'd ever heard Russian. The prisoner did. But the idea of it is that Scott, yes, he does talk a lot like me, okay? And you should have been in the pickup truck when we went and made that trip 3 different times. There wasn't a whole lot of airspace left in there. We sucked it all out of there talking. But the one thing that he has that I don't have is he's brilliantly smart, and he knows how to get a team to move to get the best possible training in writing. I do a lot of training and stuff, and may not all be in writing. Although y'all saw that I did do that, but he is such a good guy doing that, and he's the perfect person to represent the United States of America, teaching foreign over there as the director of the ILEA Academy. He is a true diplomat, and what he's doing over there is amazing, absolutely amazing. He's one of my good friends, and literally 43 years we've known each other.
Wow. You've gotten a lot of accolades, and you've touched so many lives in your career. I mean, everybody in this room has been influenced by you. You received an award in '89, the LULAC Award. Can you tell the listener what that is and how that went?
This is actually kind of funny. So Gary Kirkpatrick had written me up for an award, right? And so LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, came to Dallas. And this was in a very political time. And I'll never forget, Jim Maddox was running for governor at that time. And LULAC is a huge organization. There was probably 15,000 people in this room, and I'm going to accept this award, and I don't speak Spanish.
I was just going to ask, do they know you don't speak Spanish?
No. And I'm going to be the LULAC Officer of the Year. So I am sweating. I'm at my grandparents' house. Please tell me something I can say. Teach me something.
Hola.
Yeah. It was that bad. And so I'm at the luncheon, and they're going to bring me up in just a few minutes. But luckily, Jim Maddox got up there, and he talked for 30 minutes, and they said, we're not going to have time for you to come up and speak, but we're just going to come up, give you the award, take your picture, and you're going to. I said, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. But, I got that award, but it was mainly because they were looking for somebody that was brown that was already up for an award or got an award, and that's how I got that. But it was an honor. It absolutely was an honor. Not hating, just stating.
No. Hey, the truth is truth. You're still actually a reserve officer with DPD.
I am.
And how many years are you going on now?
On July the 23rd, I'll celebrate my 43rd year with DPD. Now, they try to give me a 40-year pin. I said no. I appreciate you giving me the 30-year pin that you never gave me because, I was here 31 years full time.
Well, you got to stay at least 33 to get your pin.
I think that's right. But the idea of it is that, all I do now is teach. I do help a lot of people who are teaching. Eddie O'Barr and I work together many times, bouncing ideas off of me because he did like the bombing here at the headquarters building, and all he's doing to me is just saying, bouncing, hey, what do you think about this? Or should this go here? Or should that go there? So that's the kind of stuff I do, and I teach a lot. I got a lot of credit when I went to Budapest and taught. But I will tell you that the Romanians and the Hungarians were real good with the touch, but the Serbians not so much.
Yeah. They didn't like that.
Yeah.
So when you left here, I know you're still continuing teaching to this day, but you went to work for a well-known local family.
Yes, I did.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's quite honestly, it was such a lucky stroke of luck. But remember, go back to Roger Martin. Roger Martin brought me out to the academy and did so much great things for me. And then Roger was at Hunt Oil, and he was working there. And I remember I did something with him, and he's like, hey, matter of fact, me and Wenzel, and I don't take Wenzel's advice because he's never very good or right. But so we go have lunch with Roger down at the headquarters building, right? I mean, at Hunt headquarters. And he says to me, Roger says, would you be interested in coming to work for me here part-time? And I said, in uniform? Because, I do everything I can to try not to wear a uniform. Not for any other reason.
I don't think I've ever seen you in a uniform.
I actually put a picture in there where I do have one.
Oh, you ought to see the bunch of the treasure trove of pictures I have at my desk.
Yeah, my favorite one's with Fletcher's corny dog shirt. But the idea of it was that
Going downtown with Roger Martin.
So we're having lunch, and Roger asked me to work there, and I said, in uniform? He goes, no, I need you to wear your suit and tie, and I want you to come here, and I want you to develop training for the communications center, for our security officers and things like that. And they have a program there called the Blue Jackets, and it's like floor wardens on the floors. And the idea of it is I need you to train them and take over that program. So I said, yeah, that's perfect. And Wenzel looked at me and says, he hasn't told you how much he's going to pay you yet. I said, shut up, Wenzel. I'm going to work for that man right there. And of course, it was not much money at the time, but it was great. It was part-time. I was a part-time officer. But I worked there for a year. And then I remember he called me in the office and said, hey, he had a little sticky note and it said, what would it take to come to Hunt? And it was a question mark. He says, I need you to go home. I need you to come back, and that needs to be a number of what it's going to take for you to come here. Now, my plan was to stay till I was 60 years old. I was going to have $1.7 million in the drop. Well, that didn't work out, but that's what was going to happen. And I was going to leave and just live happy ever after. But I know me, too. I could have never done that. I would have had to stay doing something. So I said, my wife and I got together. My wife
put
Laura,
$5,000 on there.
Yeah, exactly.
For the
so
budget.
we got together. We figured out about what I was really making, which was scarily not as much as I thought I was making, but we did it. I went back and I gave that number to him. He goes, okay, can you start in 2 weeks? I said, holy crap. Yeah, yes, I can. And I went to work. I retired here from here on September the 11th, but I started there on August the 16th. So I did a double dip there for a little bit. And I've been working there. This year will be full-time. I will have been there 12 years. And it's
already been 12 years?
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Remarkable 12 years. Working listen, I'm very fortunate. I work for the best police department in the country, and I worked in some really cool places. And I never elevated up, but I never felt less because I didn't do that, right? I mean, you guys are both senior corporals just like me. You're the sergeant, but all of us feel like we are making a contribution to Dallas Police Department all the time. And it's the best police department in the world, I believe. And I still do believe that. And now I work for the best corporation, or more importantly, family-owned business in the world. And you, when you get there, your family, and they treat you like your family, and it's beautiful, man. It really is.
Longtime police supporters.
Absolutely.
In this city.
Absolutely.
One thing that they did, and you actually we spoke offline about this, is the Restlands Garden of Honor. I know that several of our brothers are buried there, but I never knew where the land came from. I always thought that it was Restland that donated it, but it was actually the Hunt family.
Yeah. interestingly enough, the Hunt family that I work for, and that means the entire group of the Hunt family that I work for, are not ones that like to be in the limelight. They don't. We have those families, and they do amazing things for our city. But I'm very fortunate to work for a humble group of people, and they don't want any fanfare or anything like that. They just want to contribute and help the community. They help hospitals. They help homeless shelters. They help. That's who they are, and they do this without anyone ever knowing it. So interestingly enough, I've been to a few funerals at the Garden of Honor, and I think all of y'all know that particular area. Lauren Aarons is buried there, and Mike Smith's buried there. Brian Jackson's buried there, and so I've been there. And then a few years ago, in 2016, I believe it was, they asked me, "Can you go and represent the Hunt family at the memorial that's done on Memorial Day, and speak on their behalf?" And I went, "For what?" They said, "Because that garden is donated by the Hunt family, and that monument was Ray and Nancy Hunt's vision, and they're the ones that commissioned the artist to build that beautiful monument that you see in the middle there,
with the angel bringing up
yeah,
the officer and the firefighter."
Yeah. So let me explain to you what you have there. The idea is people don't realize it, and I went there for funerals long before I knew what it was. The Garden of Honor was donated by Ray Hunt family, and they did it to allow first responders to be buried for free in this beautiful part of Restland. We've all been there. In the middle of it is a monument. Let me tell you a little bit about this monument. It was sculpted by Robert Hogan, a local artist. It's 27 feet tall, and it's 11 feet in diameter. What sits on that is, on the sides of it, there are Dallas police uniforms that are in bronzed and Dallas firefighter uniforms that are bronzed all the way around it. And then there's two of them that have just a reef, an olive tree reef. And then above it, going into the heavens, you'll see one angel with a reef in his hand, and it's got a firefighter, a Dallas firefighter being taken to heaven. The other one has a Dallas police officer being taken to heaven. That was Ray Hunt and Nancy Hunt's vision of what they wanted in the middle of that garden. They had seen something similar to that when they were on a vacation together in Vancouver of a World War I monument. And they said, we need to have that commissioned and built and put in the middle of the Garden of Honor. And so I'd been there numerous times, working for the Hunt family, having no idea that had happened, because they're not ones to ever talk about that. And so
that's remarkable, though, that they would be on vacation and see a monument that touching and say, we need to create something like that for Dallas Police and Dallas Fire. That's really humbling.
It really is. And what's really interesting about it is it's not just for Dallas Police and Dallas Fire. It's for any Metroplex first responder. And it's open. I talked to Restland just yesterday to ask about that, and they said, yeah, it's all free. And the only criteria is you're a first responder and you're died in the line of duty.
Thank you, Nancy and Ray Hunt, for that from the Dallas Police Department.
There are quite a few names that are buried there for police and fire. Can you read those, Kevin?
Yeah, I'll do the best I can, because it's a pretty tough thing to do.
That's why I'm getting you to do it.
Officer Patrick Metzler, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, October the 23rd, 2002. Officer Brian Jackson, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, November 13th, 2005. Senior Corporal Victor Lazada, Sr., Dallas Police Department. End of watch, February 22nd, 2008. Senior Corporal Norm Smith, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, January 6th, 2009. Officer Craig Shaw, Lancaster Police Department. End of watch, June 20th, 2010. Fireman Chris Pham, Dallas Fire Department. End of watch, June 23rd, 2011. Fireman Stan Wilson, Dallas Fire Department. End of watch, May 20th of 2013. Fireman William Tanksley, Dallas Fire Department. End of watch, February 10th, 2014. Sergeant Michael Smith, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, July the 7th, 2016. Senior Corporal Lauren Aarons, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, July 8th, 2016. Detective Jerry Walker, Little Elm Police Department. End of watch, January 17th, 2017. Fireman Larry Dalton, Dallas Fire Department. End of watch, July the 16th, 2017. Special Agent Paul Ragsdale, ATF Dallas Field Office. End of watch, May 24th, 2018. Officer Rahulio Santander, Jr., Dallas Police Department. End of watch, April 25th, 2018. Sergeant Bronk McCoy, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, November 16th, 2020. Officer Mitchell Penton, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, February 13th, 2021. Fireman David Leos, Dallas Fire Department. End of watch, September the 2nd of 2021. Officer Christopher Gibson, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, January the 2nd, 2022. Officer Darren Burks, Dallas Police Department. End of watch, August 29th, 2024.
Thank you, Kevin. I know quite a few of those people on that, and I know you. We all do. Thank you to the Hunt family again. Seriously, that I had no idea that where that plot came from.
Yeah,
but I'm glad that they are letting you share that story, because I think the listeners and I think Dallas officers and Dallas Fire need to know the history behind that.
Yeah, and the memorial is striking. And that's always stuck out in my mind from the very first police funeral I went to, 15, 16 years ago, was that memorial in the center.
Yeah, the one thing about wrestling out there, they have a lot of really good memorials, but man, that one it'll take your breath away. It is that incredible. And if you've ever lost a person, a friend, a colleague, another officer, another firefighter, and you go out there, it gives you that sense of honor for what they did in their life.
Yeah, it is definitely the Garden of Honor for a reason.
Yes.
Kevin, we went through a long journey here, and the listener will walk away with not only you're very well at speaking, but you're very accomplished. And behind every first responder that puts on a badge or puts on a helmet or answers a call, there's always a family that's behind that you have to have their support. Can you talk about your family?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the greatest part of my life, So I'm very fortunate. I got married a second time, and I found absolutely the love of my life, somebody that I can share my life with. And my wife, her name is Lori, and Lori is incredible support to me at all times. Sometimes in a very funny way, but she's always in support of me, and I'm very fortunate to have her. When I came into the marriage, she had two boys, Austin and Garrett, who I've had with me for so many years, and I have the most beautiful relationship with both of those boys. I was being a stepfather is a title, but you're just there to be their dad, and And both of those boys had a wonderful dad who did a lot of great things. And as the step parent, I know my role, and it's not to get in the way of that dad, but to support in every way I possibly can. So those two boys have been, they're great. And I love them very much. And then I had a daughter coming into the marriage, and Joe, I know you have a daughter, and there's just something special about daughters. And my daughter and I are very close. And I will say that I love her with everything I am, and I'm so thankful that my wife, who didn't give birth to her, has loved her just the way I do. And there's a lot of beauty to that. Absolutely. So I will say that part of my family has been such a great support to me. And I take a lot of pride in doing what I do because they do laugh. I use them a lot in my classes. I really do. I usually say I have two knuckleheaded boys and a perfect daughter, but that's not necessarily true because my boys are wonderful people. And my wife is my life. And so, I'm just thankful for all the people that are out there that are supporting the law enforcement officers. One of the things for me is that I'm not a cop anymore. I mean, I am, but I'm not, right? The idea of it is I'm so thankful that I get to teach every now and then to cops and give out information that hopefully will make them better and will make them appreciate what they have, and because they're the ones doing it, not me.
Kevin, we're going to wrap this up, but I want you to leave the listener with a lasting message from Kevin Navarro, what you want them to, before the music hits, to sit with and remember from this episode.
Yeah, if there's anything, I'm a firm believer that every day is a training day in every aspect of your life. If I have knowledge of something that can help somebody, I want to share it. Every day is a training day. And in that regard, I'm going to close with something that I was told by the lady by the name of Vivian Cross. Vivian lost her husband in the line of duty as a Capitol police officer. She was speaking to a bunch of trainers that were driver instructor trainers at the police memorial wall. On the police memorial wall today, there is a quote from Vivian Cross. It's not the same quote that I'm fixing to give you. That's there and it's immortalized there. It's beautiful what she says. But in talking to trainers, this is what she said. And it's important to me because I think the trainers are what makes us better and keeps us striving to do the best we can. She was talking to trainers when she said, this is in 2001, I challenge each of you to look inside yourself and see the true noble calling of your profession. To train is a gift. You're in a rare place to bring law enforcement to inspiring doing what they do. You can call law enforcement to the mountaintop of superiority instead of the valley of mediocrity. In a special way, you guard the memorial wall. While there is no way you can prepare those you train for every situation they will encounter, you can instill in them the desire for the pursuit of excellence. It is the development of that mindset that will keep names off the memorial wall.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.